In a sunlit conservatory, a princess quietly described a dream of her own death. Across from her, the great wizard Kiltz kept reading, dismissing it as either a nightmare or the kind of prophecy people invent to glorify royal bloodlines. She rejected prophecy. He said he'd already called it a nightmare. Annoyed at being brushed off, she accused him of being cold. He replied that she was wasting his time. Still, she continued. In the dream, she saw her lifeless body below as her soul drifted into darkness filled with the sound of waves. And he was the only one there. That finally made him react. If she died like that, he said he'd be blamed. She laughed at the thought of the Empire's greatest wizard arrested. She tried to read his expression. He insisted he only spoke in facts. Wind swept petals through the room. Softly, she admitted she wished she had foresight, just to see if he would ever love her. His book snapped shut. He warned he would leave. She called his full name and asked him to look at her, and he bristled at the command. Calling herself ordinary beside him angered him more. He reminded her of her powerful lineage. She clarified she meant nothing about status. She only wanted to matter to him. She touched his sleeve and returned to the dream. Death hadn't scared her because he had been there, leading her through darkness toward falling stars. She asked what lay at the end, and whether he might ever love her. The memory shifted to childhood. A young princess met a traveling boy in a flower field. He claimed there was nothing at the end of his journey. She believed her existence meant otherwise. Later, near a seaside cliff, she found a cloaked boy lying in the grass, a tear on his cheek. As she reached out, he jolted awake, shouting a name in panic, and she recoiled. Young Kiltz jolted awake in the forest and grabbed the little princess Asha. She screamed in terror. He stared at her in confusion, then slowly released her. She trembled as he pulled his hand back. Shaken, Asha ran all the way back toward her village. She rushed into her small house, slammed the door shut, and leaned against it, gasping for breath, sweat running down her face. Her father immediately began shouting, furious about her late return and the messy house. She tried to explain she had been at the cliff. He raised his hand as if to hit her and she flinched. Instead, he dropped into his seat with a bottle and ordered her to clean rather than wander outside. He continued insulting her as she knelt on the floor and scrubbed near his feet. While cleaning, she realized he could not even bear to look at her. She sadly thought about the flowers she had picked, wishing she could have given them to him if not for meeting the strange boy on the hill. She offered to bring him water while he drank. The door suddenly creaked open. Kiltz stood there in his dark hood. Asha screamed again. Her father yelled at her for the noise while she stared at Kiltz in fear, asking how he had found her. Dishes lay shattered on the floor as the father glared at the mess and the silent stranger in his doorway. Kiltz calmly observed the scene. The father accused him of trespassing. Kiltz asked Asha's age. The father guessed around 10 and demanded to know what he wanted with his daughter. Kiltz repeated the word and stated bluntly that he intended to take the child. Both father and daughter froze in shock. The father angrily told him to leave. Kiltz placed a heavy bag of gold on the table. The father's anger vanished, replaced by stunned greed. Kiltz asked if it was enough, then pulled the bag back and said they would negotiate. He explained the gold could buy even a noble estate and that he valued the girl far higher, but her treatment had lowered that value. He began questioning the father about hitting and verbally abusing her, his gaze cold and piercing. As the father faltered, Kiltz removed most of the coins, leaving only a small portion. He said he would not pay more than that. When the father tried to argue about the cost of raising her, Kiltz threatened him with deadly calm, saying he would have killed him if the child were not present. Terror crushed the father into silence. Asha watched in horror, realizing her father was truly considering selling her. She called out to him, but he avoided her eyes. Torn between guilt and greed, he told her not to cry and claimed she would live better with the wizard, with good food and clothes. Kiltz stated he would prepare a carriage. Asha clung to her father, begging not to be sent away, promising to work hard and obey. He snapped, yelling at her to be quiet, and kicked her away. She sobbed on the floor. Breathing heavily, he looked at her one last time and muttered an apology. The man revealed that Asha was not his real daughter. She froze in shock as he explained he had found her abandoned on a beach 10 years earlier. He had taken her in hoping for a reward from a noble family, but no one came. After a leg injury ended his mercenary work, his frustration turned into resentment, and he began seeing her as a burden. Now, clutching the gold, he rejoiced that he could start over, with nowhere left to belong. Asha quietly agreed to leave with Kiltz. The man thanked her eagerly, as if she were helping him. As they prepared to go, Kiltz noticed her hair had been cut short and uneven. He understood it had been sold for money. He drew her close and made it clear she was under his protection now. He warned the man with a lethal stare never to touch her again and said he was fortunate to be alive. Outside, Kiltz apologized for the poor wagon. Asha said she had never ridden in one and did not feel she had the right to complain. He promised a better carriage once they reached a larger village. As the wagon departed, Asha looked back at the man she had called father. She wondered if he had ever loved her. Despite everything, she thanked him for raising her and begged him to stop drinking. He shouted her name as they disappeared down the road. She whispered a final farewell. The wagon rolled through dense forest. Kiltz asked if she had loved the man. She said yes. He struggled to understand how she could love someone who hurt her. She insisted it did not matter and drifted into thoughts of a beautiful dress. Noticing his stern face, she worried he was angry. The rough ride soon made her nauseous, and he told her to close her eyes. When she addressed him formally, he told her to simply call him by name. She reflected that the story about noble blood had likely been a lie to increase her her price. Kiltz asked her name and she introduced herself as Asha Konak. She asked why he chose her when other children were in the village, then said she was glad it was her and thanked him for giving her father money, believing money brought happiness. Kiltz was disturbed, realizing how deeply she had been treated like an object, and bitterly regretted sparing the man. Sensing his dark mood, she grew afraid, but he clarified his anger was not directed at her. He finally explained their destination, the Carinthia Mountains, a powerful territory beyond the prairie. As they reached the border village of Lees, she fell asleep. He watched her quietly and wished her peaceful dreams. They arrived in the crowded town filled with travelers. Asha woke in awe at the bustling streets. Before continuing, Kiltz said he needed to buy her new clothes. She flushed with embarrassment over her worn rags, noticing no one else looked as poor. Asha admitted she had no money. Kiltz stated he would pay. Fear knotted in her chest as she imagined an ever-growing debt. She insisted she could wash her rags and wear them again. He asked what she would wear while they dried, then led her away, cutting off her protests while she silently panicked over the cost she believed was stacking up. They entered an inn where a bright innkeeper offered cheap rooms or better ones. Kiltz chose the better option and ordered food without hesitation. Asha followed upstairs in a daze, anxiety building with every expense, especially since she still wore her old clothes. The room turned out far nicer than anything she had seen. Overwhelmed, she assumed she should move to a cheaper room. Kiltz told her to rest and left. Soon a maid arrived carrying steaming bathwater. Asha tried to explain there had been a mistake, but the maid said the black-haired man had arranged it for her. Asha bathed in hot water for the first time in her life, stunned by the warmth. The maid later returned with simple clean clothes, again sent by him. Asha realized he had prepared everything in advance despite her desperate refusals. Wearing the new outfit, she went downstairs and thanked him earnestly. He dismissed it as temporary until they reached a proper shop. She insisted it was more than enough and vowed to work hard to repay what she owed. He froze, not understanding why she kept calling it debt. Seeing his darkened expression, she assumed she had angered him again and rushed to prove her value. She said she could clean, take care of children, run errands, do anything useful. His book slammed shut, the sharp sound making her flinch. He looked genuinely offended by her mindset, then quickly softened when he saw her fear. Food arrived, far more than she expected, including roasted meat. Encouraged to eat, she tasted it timidly, then with growing wonder, overwhelmed by how good it was. Between bites, Kiltz explained their journey would cross the vast prairie of Nurmaz, a land that took over a month to traverse with no villages or shelter. They would need to carry all supplies. Monsters had recently appeared there. The maid added that travelers sometimes joined merchant groups for safety and that livestock were sometimes thrown to monsters as bait. Kiltz refused to travel with others, saying he disliked noise and had his own countermeasures. The mention of sacrifices twisted in Asha's thoughts. Warm bathwater, new clothes, rich food, kindness she had never known. A cold fear crept in. She began to wonder if this comfort was only preparation, if she herself might be the offering when monsters appeared. Morning came and Kiltz told Asha it was time to leave the inn. He paused, startled by how thin she looked, even more fragile than the day before. Outside, the cheerful maid waved them off with a playful remark about Asha acting older than her years. Asha waved back brightly, trying to stay hopeful. Kiltz muttered under his breath that the journey would not be truly safe as they set out toward the place called the Grave of the Wind. The wagon rolled into a vast green prairie stretching endlessly under open sky. Asha stood to look, eyes wide with wonder at the quiet sea of grass and the sound of wind alone. Kiltz asked her thoughts, then launched into an explanation. The Nurmaz savannah was one of the continent's great mysteries, where magic failed completely. That made it a natural barrier against outsiders, but also left the land isolated and cut off from progress elsewhere. The political and geographic consequences spilled from him in a steady lecture until Asha, overwhelmed, asked him to stop. She stared at the horizon, stunned by how large the world truly was. Kiltz showed her a map, pointing out their location. She was shocked to see the enormous prairie reduced to a tiny mark on paper. He studied her expression, briefly asking if she had truly wanted to come, then withdrew the question immediately. Riders appeared ahead, blocking the road. Asha hid behind Kiltz as the men warned them to turn back. They showed battered bodies and spoke of monsters appearing where none had existed before. They urged Kiltz to return to town and prepare better. Kiltz calmly observed details they missed, realizing they were not locals of Nurmaz. Pressed, the men admitted they were merchants from Astir who had been attacked while forcing a trade route through the prairie. Kiltz dismissed their warning and said they would continue. The men mocked his confidence and rode off, leaving the plains quiet again. Clouds gathered and heavy rain soon poured down. Seeing Asha exhausted, Kiltz stopped the wagon and decided they would rest inside for the night. Under a blanket, Asha shivered as rain hammered the roof. Kiltz asked if she feared monsters. She did, but his presence unsettled her just as much. He spoke quietly about the strange appearance of monsters, suspecting it was tied to Astir's attempts to push railroads through forbidden land. He believed the men were not true merchants but technicians in disguise. Monsters, he reasoned, often emerged as a reaction to human interference and misuse of magic. The explanation only deepened Asha's unease. He assured her she would be safe beside him. She looked at his slender frame and struggled to believe it. As he dimmed the lantern, he gave one firm instruction: ignore any sounds outside. Darkness closed in. A violent noise tore through the night, freezing her in terror. Lying awake, her thoughts drifted. She realized he must have walked all the way to her village before. She remembered the tear on his sleeping face the day they met and wondered what pain he carried. Fear of death tightened around her chest, and she told herself she did not want to die. Asha wakes in the darkness of the rainy night to the sound of a familiar voice urging her to return home. The voice, sounding exactly like her father, asks if she recognizes him and insists they leave quickly, claiming that money is useless and he will return it all. Despite Kiltz's strict warning not to listen to any noises from the outside, a hopeful Asha convinces herself that her father has come to save her. She ignores her hesitation and pushes through the tall, wet grass toward the voice. She spots a glowing white silhouette in the distance and runs toward it, crying out for her dad. However, as she reaches the figure, the light fades to reveal a faceless, ominous shadow. Terrified, Asha realizes too late that it is not her father, or even a human being. The monster lunges at her, and she falls back into the mud, trembling in fear. She cries out that she is scared and can't see anything, wishing to go home, though a dark thought crosses her mind asking where that home would even be. Suddenly, a hand reaches out from the storm. Kiltz shouts a command, and a massive bolt of blue lightning strikes the ground between Asha and the monster. He descends from the sky, wielding immense magical power to obliterate the shadows surrounding her. He encases Asha in a protective bubble while the monsters shriek in agony as they are destroyed by his lightning. Safe inside the bubble, Asha watches in awe, recalling stories that wizards are not human and possess the power to push mountains and turn seas into deserts. When the battle ends, Kiltz lands and shouts Asha's name with a look of intense distress. Asha flinches violently, terrified that he is angry about her attempting to escape or that he will demand his money back. Overwhelmed by her past trauma, she expects him to hit her and cowers, frantically apologizing and swearing she didn't mean to run away. Instead of striking her, Kiltz pulls her into a desperate, tight embrace, tears streaming down his face. He asks brokenly how he could lose her again when they had barely met, confessing that he thought she was gone forever. Asha is confused by his reaction, wondering if she wasn't intended to be a sacrifice to the monster after all. She stammeringly asks if her running away would have made the money he paid to her father useless. Kiltz looks at her with heartbreak, gently wiping the rain and tears from her face. He assures her that isn't the case and that he didn't bring her along for that reason. When she asks why he did bring her, the atmosphere shifts from the cold rain to a warm, golden glow. Kiltz smiles gently and tells her it is to make her happy. He declares that the gold coins mean nothing to him and offers to swear it as many times as she needs. Asha is stunned into silence as Kiltz admits he would trade an entire continent just for the fact that she is there, emphasizing how incredibly important she is to him. She is bewildered, thinking about how they only met 2 days ago and unable to understand his devotion. Kiltz's expression turns somber as he admits he isn't a great person. As the rain clears and sunlight breaks through the clouds, Kiltz stands and reaches his hand out to her. He reveals that he received a request from a certain person. Asha wonders if it was her dad, but Kiltz denies it, stating he cannot reveal the identity of the requester yet. He affirms that she was truly precious to that unknown person, and for their sake, he is bound to protect her. Asha looked up at Kiltz, troubled, weighed down by the belief she had nothing to give in return for being saved. She struggled to express that she could offer no repayment. Kiltz took her hand and she flinched, bracing for anger. Instead, his touch softened as his hand rested gently on her head. Her fear stalled, confusion rising as she sensed sadness in him rather than anger. He told her she owed nothing and that his reward had already been enough. He wondered if she was not the one who had the right to be upset. Lost, she admitted she had disobeyed him by going outside. Regret crossed his face as he blamed himself for failing to explain the danger, unwilling to frighten her without cause. Relief followed when he mentioned the protective magic he had placed on her had worked. He apologized, his hands still warm against her hair. Her thoughts drifted to the voice in the dark. The fragile hope she had clung to shattered as she accepted her father would never come. Tears filled her eyes. The comfort she felt now was something she had never received before, yet she had waited for it all the same. Overcome, she buried her face against Kiltz and cried. He held her firmly while she shook, and deep down she knew she had understood the truth from the start. When the rain passed, he wiped her tear-streaked cheeks with a handkerchief. Embarrassment flushed her face. He lightly teased her before noticing her exhaustion. Sleep tugged at her, and he lifted her into his arms, wrapping her in his cloak. She curled against him, murmuring about the warmth and the faint scent of sun that clung to him despite the storm. He told her the creature was gone, a mirror spirit that no longer existed. As drowsiness thickened her voice, she listened while he explained the spirit lured victims by calling out in familiar voices and tempting them with the words they longed to hear. She wondered if he had heard anything. For a moment, a memory surfaced in his mind of a blonde woman calling his name. He pushed it aside and gently claimed he had heard nothing. She sensed something unspoken, but sleep dragged her under before she could ask more. Under clear daylight later, they sat together studying a map. She pointed out places she had memorized, misreading the orientation. He corrected her softly, promising to teach her letters. She tilted the map and noticed the land resembled a dragon. He confirmed the image echoed an old legend told across the north about a dying dragon whose body became the continent after chasing a golden bird. He clarified it was only a myth, though real dragons did exist. She compared the size of a real dragon to the lake before them at sunset, then asked where her home lay. He pointed out the rough area, saying it was not far. She wondered if she could see her house from there and what waited for her. He answered plainly that nothing special remained. Confusion crossed her face until she reasoned that returning home mattered even if nothing grand awaited. He smiled, agreeing quietly. By evening he suggested returning to the inn. She brightened at the thought of swimming in the lake the next day, and he allowed it. They reached a mountain town where an inn stood beyond a crowd struggling to free a stuck wagon. Shouts and strained effort filled the air air as people worked together. Kiltz grew irritated at the noise, having chosen the place for its quiet. Asha looked up as he lowered his hood. Magic flickered in his eyes, subtle and controlled. The crowd stared as the wagon wheel rose into the air, weightless under a soft blue glow. Shock rippled through the onlookers while a man hurried everyone to steady the suspended load. Laughter burst from the inn's entrance at the impossible lightness of the cargo. Using the distraction, Kiltz and Asha slipped inside. He called her name, and she asked how he could use magic. After a pause, he gave a simple explanation, saying he had awakened to it after sleeping countless times. Awe filled her eyes as she tried to grasp the scale of that time. Later, on the terrace above the lake, she slumped over the table, jealous and small. His awkward amusement lingered until a well-dressed woman approached, politely asking for a moment. He shut her down at once, cold and dismissive. She persisted, certain he had been the one who lifted the wagon. He denied it, but she explained her family connection to a wizard and recognized the spell. Gratitude poured from her as she praised the rarity of such skill and asked about his background. She offered a meal and thanks. His refusal sharpened, emotionless, leaving her startled. Her attention shifted to Asha, whom she called cute and mistook for a disciple. Kiltz stood abruptly, placing distance between them, declaring the child under his care and ending the intrusion. The woman backed off with an apology and a polite farewell. At the mention of her own child, Asha perked up. A red-haired boy peeked out, smiling and whispering about entering a magic academy the following year. They left, and Kiltz muttered in disgust. Asha asked about the academy. He explained it was a national institution where magic was taught, mostly to nobles, though anyone could learn a little with training. She gazed over the lake, wishing she could learn. When she asked if learning magic had made him happy, his expression dulled and the answer came without warmth. Inside, the memory carried no joy. The scene shifted to a clothing boutique bright with mirrors. Asha stood stiffly in a frilled dress, overwhelmed and unsure. Staff and Kiltz reassured her at once, praising how well it suited her and fussing over her pale hair. More dresses appeared, finer and more expensive, while she shrank under the attention, convinced such things were not meant for her. A pink dress was chosen despite her hesitation. A comment about her short hair drew a quiet admission tied to her father, sadness flickering before she hid it. Gratitude mixed with embarrassment as she noticed a real family nearby. When asked if she liked the dress, humility stopped her from claiming a choice. Kiltz entered, looked at her, and said it suited her. He turned to the staff and ordered everything. Excitement erupted around them while shock rooted her in place. Outside with stacks of boxes, she asked why he was so kind when her real father never had been. He answered that it was not personal, only a request from someone who valued her greatly. Confusion lingered, but she smiled softly as they walked. In the square, she shyly asked if he would become her father. The question struck him motionless, color draining from his face. Panic made her retract it immediately. He turned away, flustered but not angry. She walked beside him quietly, spirits dim. They passed a luxury shop window. He asked if she wanted anything, gesturing toward a bag. She refused, yet her gaze clung to a doll among the fine goods. A longing she had never allowed herself surfaced as her hand pressed to the glass. He noticed and paused, watching her with quiet thoughtfulness. Kiltz explained that the display item was an automatic doll, a device built to repeat fixed motions with careful precision. Asha watched the tiny movements, entranced, and wondered if it was magic. He clarified it was a magic tool, not a spell, and asked if she wanted it. She hesitated, worried about the price. He told her he would only buy it if she truly wanted it. After a quiet struggle, she admitted she did. He purchased it without delay. Outside, she sat on a bench, gently shaking the doll and smiling as it moved. As sunset colored the lake, he returned to her earlier question about needing a father. She lowered her gaze. He acknowledged he had spoken badly about her father and accepted blame, offering to grant whatever she wished in return. She stopped him at once, insisting he had done nothing wrong. He softened, encouraging her to be more honest, to act like a child when she wanted, to lean on him without restraint. He promised to buy what she liked and listen to what she said because she deserved that much. She brightened, asking shyly if she could be spoiled sometimes and if she could sit on his lap. He allowed it. As she settled against him, footsteps approached. A familiar voice expressed pleased surprise. She flinched, his expression hardened. An older nobleman with white hair and a trimmed beard stood behind the bench, smug and composed. Count Kaizuyu commented on the unexpected meeting in a remote village. Hostility met him at once. He brushed it aside, claiming coincidence and leisure travel, teasing that Kiltz still carried himself like before. His attention shifted to the child. He pointed out the companion with curiosity. Kiltz shut him down immediately. Kazuyu ignored the warning, stepping closer, prying with false politeness about noble manners. The air turned heavy. He reached toward Asha. Kiltz demanded to know what he was doing. Kaizuyu pressed further, hand stretching out, voice sweet and invasive as he demanded her name. Terror froze Asha. His smiling face warped in her vision into something monstrous and serpentine. Confusion and dread tangled in her chest. His hand moved closer. She trembled and called for Kiltz. In an instant, Kiltz caught the man's wrist midair and forbade him from touching her. Cold fury sharpened his voice as he declared he would teach proper conduct himself. His grip tightened, twisting the arm past comfort. Kazuyu's composure cracked into sweat and strain. Pressure increased until a sharp crack split the air. Pain twisted Kazuyu's face as he staggered back, clutching his arm, anger flaring beneath humiliation. Dark magic coiled around Kiltz as he rose, silent and lethal. Kaizuyu mocked the reunion, masking retreat with sarcasm. A warning followed not to use his first name. Mockery answered, then withdrawal. He left with a promise of another meeting. Silence returned. Kiltz apologized. Asha asked who the man was. He dismissed the question and reached for her instead. She hugged him tightly. Unease lingered in his thoughts, the sense that Kaizu knew something about her. Later, near full sunset, a voice called Asha's name. Kiltz turned sharply, pulling her behind him. A red-haired man with a scar greeted him casually. Recognition settled. Altman. Behind him stood Kaizu again, hands folded, amused. He remarked on arranging a reunion between former Ivory Tower associates, pleased with himself. Kiltz stared at Altman and stated they had never been close. Altman answered with an awkward apology. He told him quietly that she had missed him. Behind them, Kazuyu watched with sharp interest, noting the strong resemblance and deciding he would take the child. Kiltz stopped and looked back, grip tightening. He said the idea of handing her over was absurd and that Kaizuyu's plotting meant nothing. He accused the Kaizuyu family of generations of greed and called him a man without dignity. His gaze dropped to the cane, questioning whether it was an Egeron relic and mocking the way Kazuyu bent himself before power for scraps. Kazuyu accepted the insult lightly, saying the Dean of Yifranger was not generous and begging had been necessary. He asked whether Kiltz planned to fight using incomplete magic borrowed from a dragon. Altman stepped forward, smiling without warmth, implying Kaizuyu would not be alone and asking if Kiltz feared being overwhelmed. Understanding a fight was unavoidable, Kiltz looked down at Asha and told her to go home first. He instructed her to tell them he had sent her when she arrived. She clung to him, asking what would happen to him. He told her he would follow soon. Magic activated. Light surrounded her. As her body faded, her eyes caught blood scattering across the stones where she had stood. She woke in a dark forest, shaking. A small light approached. A silver-haired boy with a lantern found her sitting in the grass and asked if she was all right. She asked where Kiltz was. The boy answered that he had not come yet and that it would take time. He muttered that talking to someone his own age felt awkward and asked how her trip had been. She did not understand which trip he meant. His mood brightened as he told her to follow because the old man was waiting. They walked through the trees. He looked at the sky and called her a star. She repeated the word, confused. He led her to a wooden house in a clearing. An elderly man with a white beard opened the door and demanded to know who it was. Asha introduced herself and said Kiltz had sent her. The name shocked him. He reacted with loud disbelief that Kiltz had reappeared and immediately complained about being forced into babysitting. Still grumbling, he noticed her lingering outside and told her to come in quickly. Inside, he gave her warm milk and told her to drink. He sat heavily, irritated by the situation. She tried to explain that Kiltz might be in danger. He cut her off, saying he could guess what happened. Kazuyu and Altman confronted him and a fight followed. He told her she did not need to worry and that Kiltz had only known she should not witness violence. She asked if Kiltz was truly that strong. The old man said yes, adding that the other two were insignificant compared to him. She wondered if the old man was Kiltz's teacher. He denied it, calling himself useless and claiming he could not use magic. He then used a small device to create the illusion of pulling out an eye, startling her before explaining it was only a tool that could record what it saw. Saying it was late, he told them to sleep and pointed out a room. The silver-haired boy objected that it was dirty. They argued over responsibility until the old man gave up and told the boy to let Asha use his room for the night and clean the other one later. The boy took her hand and led her upstairs, introducing himself as Pram. Downstairs, the old man remained by the fire, staring at the vegetables on the table and quietly noting again how much she resembled someone he remembered. Pram handed Asha a folded nightgown and as she thanked him, he reached out to wipe a smudge from her cheek. It was a streak of blood. The sight of it made Asha freeze, her mind flashing back to the danger Kiltz was in, but Pram simply asked if she was okay. She blushed slightly and whispered that she was. As she settled into bed, she asked if she could turn off the light, but quickly corrected herself, admitting the dark was too scary. Pram agreed to leave the lamp on a low setting and wished her a good night before leaving the room. Asha lay awake, unable to sleep. Her thoughts were consumed by her broken doll and the safety of Kiltz. She moved to the window, watching the leaves fall in the moonlight, hoping to see him walking up the path. She waited for a long time, but Kiltz did not return. Eventually, the sun rose, accompanied by the chirping of birds. Asha woke up and immediately checked her doll, hoping it might move, but it remained lifeless. She sighed, accepting that it didn't work. Downstairs, the sound of sizzling food filled the kitchen. Pram was busy cooking at the stove. He greeted Asha as she came down the stairs. The old man was already seated at the table, reading a large stack of papers. He asked if she slept well and instructed her to sit. Asha's first question was about Kiltz, but Pram bluntly informed her that he hadn't come. Asha noticed the old man reading and asked if he was looking at a big book. He asked how she had grown up and then realized she couldn't read the text on the paper. Asha hid her face behind the sheets, blushing deeply and admitting she couldn't read, feeling embarrassed by her lack of knowledge. The table fell silent. Pram chewed his bacon thoughtfully before breaking the tension. He told Asha that she could learn letters quickly and offered to teach her. Asha's eyes sparkled with hope. The old man grumbled, complaining that his house was completely turning into a nursery. However, he immediately piled more bread onto Asha's plate, shouting that she needed to eat more because she was as skinny as a squirrel. Later that morning, Asha walked alone through the dense woods. She regretted not following Pram immediately after breakfast, as he had disappeared as soon as he finished eating. She wandered until she found a massive, ornate glass building glowing glowing in the sunlight. She peered through the glass, mesmerized by the beauty inside. She entered the greenhouse and found Pram watering the plants. He noticed her and began explaining the flora. He pointed out the daisies and then a round, spiky plant, a cactus. He explained that it was a plant from the south, specifically the Crescent Moon Peninsula. Asha was confused, knowing that region was far away, and asked how it got here. Pram revealed he was raising it with magic. Asha stared at the cactus, thinking that magic could do anything, but her expression turned sorrowful. Pram noticed her mood shift. Asha admitted she was sad, confessing that she knew Kiltz got hurt while fighting and that it still bothered her despite the old man's assurances. Pram looked away, trying to find the right words. He told her that Kiltz had made everything in this greenhouse. He explained that while creating a garden like this with magic was usually impossible, Kiltz could do it because he was a truly great wizard. Asha realized Pram was trying to reassure her. She smiled warmly and asked him to tell Kiltz how pretty the garden was when he returned. Pram blushed and awkwardly told her to go sit and rest. Asha sat at a white table surrounded by flowers, holding her broken doll. She murmured that it would be nice if there was a way to fix it. Pram approached and asked for the doll. He inspected it closely and delivered his diagnosis. There was no damage to the spell itself, but there was a temporary loss of mana due to the collision. He told her that if they just put mana back into it, the doll would move again. Asha, confused, asked what mana was. Pram explained it was the substance needed to use magic. When she asked where they could get it, Pram looked around the magical garden. His eyes glowed slightly as he told her that everything was right here. Pram said mana couldn't be seen, only felt, and told Asha to close her eyes. She tried but sensed nothing. Adjusting, he held out his hand. She took it. Sitting across from each other in the greenhouse, he guided her to feel through him. A faint warmth stirred between their palms, her first hint of magic. The moment their hands touched, a jolt ran through her. Her eyes flew open as an unfamiliar current flowed into her, warm and bright. Pram told her that sensation was mana. She looked down to see faint light flickering around her fingers, tiny particles shimmering, and stared in breathless awe. Excitement bubbled up. She wondered if that energy could fix the broken doll and eagerly wanted to try. Pram encouraged her and covered her hands with his as she held the doll, carefully directing the flow. She focused hard, hands trembling, light gathering around the toy. Then the doll stirred and slowly stood in her palms. Joy burst out of her and she threw herself at Pram in pure relief and pride before racing toward the house. She stormed inside calling for her grandfather, ignoring his complaints about muddy feet. She proudly showed the doll as it stood and bowed on her hand. His skepticism vanished into shock as he inspected it and realized it was functioning again. When he learned she had done it with mana, he dropped down to her level, demanding to know who taught her. She nervously admitted Pram helped but did not understand how she managed it. His intense stare terrified her and she shrank back, convinced she had done something wrong. The tension shattered when he suddenly roared with laughter. He praised her, explaining that children who learn to handle mana on their own were extremely rare. He told her to ask Kiltz to teach her magic when he returned, revealing that Kiltz had once been a royal court wizard with many students. Asha hugged the doll, quietly hoping Kiltz would be proud too. A week later, she spotted Kiltz approaching the cabin and ran straight into his arms. Relief washed over him as he held her. She checked him for injuries while he brushed it off. When asked about Haskin, she pointed toward the house just as Haskin burst out swinging a poker. Kiltz dodged easily while holding her, trading sharp remarks with the old man. The argument shifted when Haskin angrily pointed out how much Asha resembled someone from the past. Kiltz's expression darkened and he refused to explain, saying the time was not right. He carried Asha inside, silent and heavy with thought while she sensed the change but received no answers. Later they gathered for a meal. Pram cooked while Haskin read. Kiltz sat beside Asha and they ate quietly. When she finished, she eagerly showed him the doll. It stood and bowed on the table. He first assumed she had simply cared for it well, then noticed signs it had once been broken. She happily explained that she fixed it using mana. Kiltz went completely still as the meaning of her words sank in. Kiltz stared hard at the doll in his hand. His silence twisted into fear inside Asha, and she hurried to say he did not need to force himself. He blinked out of his thoughts, confused, then gently tried to comfort her, saying he could repair it later and buy her anything else. The softness vanished as his face turned stern, and he questioned why she used magic at all. She flinched, the joy from earlier collapsing into cold dread. Later the breakfast table sat untouched. Upstairs, she lay face down on her bed, hiding beneath the blanket as tears soaked the pillow. Magic filled the world around her and everyone she admired could use it, yet she felt pushed away from it. Her grandfather's praise echoed in her head, making the rejection hurt more, and she cried quietly into the dark. Pram slipped into the room and softly called her name. He found her shaking under the covers and gently pulled the blanket back. The moment she saw him, she broke down, insisting she had done nothing wrong. She clung to him, sobbing. He stroked her back and wiped her cheeks, explaining that Kiltz was afraid. The idea confused her, but he held her close and promised to speak to Kiltz again. Downstairs, she later crept to the stair railing and listened. Haskin casually asked Kiltz if he had killed someone. Kiltz answered with chilling calm, explaining he had left the man alive under endless torment. Haskin laughed, laughed, but Kilt's remained dark and distant before quietly asking how Asha learned mana. Haskin said she figured it out herself while fixing a doll and pointedly asked if Kilt's had taught her. Silence followed. Haskin shifted the question, demanding to know where Kilt's found a child who looked so much like someone from his past. Kilt's fist tightened on the table. He refused to explain. Haskin argued that she could simply live normally without magic, but Kilt insisted she should never learn it, no matter her talent. Hearing this, Asha covered her mouth upstairs, heart sinking. Kilt said her smiling safely there was enough. Haskin exploded, accusing him of trapping her in isolation without friends or a future. Kilt answered warily that the outside world was hell and she did not need to see it. The argument turned to her origins. He revealed he found her in a remote northern region with a retired mercenary. Haskin pointed out she was bright and worth teaching, but Kilt still refused magic, mentioning she could not even write yet. Haskin pushed further, questioning how Kilt's planned to raise her and whether he meant to adopt her. The old man ranted about school, friends, and the life she deserved. Kilt arrogantly believed no teacher surpassed him, but Haskin clarified he meant relationships and a future family. Kilt reacted with detached indifference, which only angered Haskin more. Then Haskin bluntly suggested Kilt's brought her for inappropriate reasons. A violent crash shook the room as Kilt's lunged across the table and seized Haskin by the collar, mana flaring darkly around him. His fury filled the air, warning Haskin not to cross certain lines. Haskin wheezed but stayed defiant until Kilt's released him. A small hiccup broke the tension. Both turned to see Asha frozen on the stairs, terrified after hearing everything. Haskin hurried to downplay the fight with clumsy humor, while Kilt snapped irritably. Then he exhaled, walked toward her, and his anger faded into regret. He softly apologized and asked to talk. They gathered at the table in thick silence. He asked how much she had heard. She nervously admitted she heard from the violent part onward. Relief flickered across his face. Then she shyly asked whether learning magic cost a lot of money. Surprised, he said no. She clenched her clothes, gathering courage, and quietly suggested that if money was the problem, he could teach her himself. He looked at her, torn between fear for her safety and the clear hope shining in her eyes. Asha shot up from her chair, desperation spilling out as she insisted she wanted to learn. Words tumbled over each other as she promised to work hard and repay him someday, even if she had nothing now. Kilt answered calmly that money was not the problem. She misunderstood and hurried to offer labor instead, volunteering to cook and clean, proudly claiming she was good at it. He stopped her firmly, saying he would never make her do such things. Her feet shifted under the table, nerves building. She pushed further, offering to do absolutely anything if he would just teach her even a little. Emotion took over completely. She collapsed forward onto the table, pleading, voice breaking, promising to study hard and be obedient. Kiltz tried to interrupt, calling her name, but she kept going until he finally told her to stop before it dragged on forever. He asked seriously if she wanted this that badly. She clenched her fists and answered with shining eyes, determination outweighing fear. He stared at her, and for a brief moment her face overlapped with a smiling woman from his past. A long breath left him, resistance crumbling under memory and promise. Since he had once said he would grant her wishes, he could not take it back now. With quiet resignation, he agreed to teach her. Morning arrived with bird song and pale light. She slipped out of bed carefully so she would not wake Pram and padded downstairs. A pot simmered softly. Kilt stood awake with a steaming mug and noted her early start. Curious about the rich smell, she asked, and he explained it was coffee, rare in the north but somehow obtained. She eyed the dark drink, took a sip, and shuddered at the bitterness. He observed that it was an acquired taste. She wiped her mouth and immediately asked when lessons would begin, suggesting now. He studied her eager face, then pointed out the sun had barely risen and told her to wait. She dropped into a chair, vibrating with anticipation, glancing at him with flushed cheeks, having expected magic right away. Thoughts swirled about long waiting and worries about money, but none of it stopped the excitement. He sipped his drink slowly while dawn finally lit the trees. Later they sat outside. She perched on a small stool, glowing with happiness he had never seen before. He took a seat across from her and began not with spells but with a question about winter. Confusion crossed her face. She guessed it came because the weather turned cold. He asked why it grew cold. She did not know. He asked why plants grew from the soil. Remembering a lesson, she answered that nutrients in the earth fed them. He asked why those nutrients existed at all. She blanked, frustrated and lost. He told her to watch. Brushing his hair back, he placed a hand on the grass. Mana flowed quietly into the ground. A yellow flower suddenly sprouted and bloomed where he touched. Her eyes widened in awe. He asked if she understood. She shook her head, breathless. He explained he had infused mana into the soil to make a seed grow instantly. Her earlier answer about nutrients was correct, he said, but in a mage's terms, mana in the earth allowed life to sprout. Realization dawned that mana created life. He clarified that mana existed everywhere and that she had been surrounded by it since birth. Changing seasons, moving stars, ripening crops, birds, scents, howls, all were movements of mana. Standing in the sunlight, he described magic as the force that made everything possible, the very source of life, likened to the breath of the last dragon. She swallowed nervously. A mage, he said, was someone born able to sense and use this power. Magic was usually realized alone, not taught, but since she had already touched it, guiding her became his responsibility. She looked at him with with hope, and he confirmed that from today onward he would properly teach her. Joy radiated from her, but he raised a hand to set conditions first. She enthusiastically declared she would give anything, even her soul, and he quickly told her to calm down. His expression hardened as he laid down the first rule: magic must never be used to harm. She answered instantly with bright confidence, promising she would never break that rule. Kiltz continued, face set, laying down a second rule that magic must be used only when truly necessary. The vagueness puzzled her, but he said she would have to judge for herself. She thought back and realized she had never seen him waste magic on small chores. The weight of that sank in and she agreed. He straightened, voice turning grave as he gave the final warning: never attempt to bring back the dead. The air grew heavy. Wind moved softly through the grass while she sat small and still, intimidated but resolute. She lifted her head and promised. He studied her in silence, then accepted. Formality entered his tone as he spoke her full name and declared her his student, binding their roles as teacher and disciple under an ancient vow. He held out his hand. She placed hers in it. With a precise motion, he traced a glowing sigil into her palm. Magic flared and she jolted in surprise. He explained it would help her handle mana, but would fade within a day and need renewing. With that done, he began practical training. A dull stone floated between them. She vibrated with excitement until he told her to calm down and handed it to her. It was a mana stone used in lanterns, he said, appearing ordinary until touched by magic. In his hand it shone warm gold. Lanterns worked by reacting to mana inside them. He checked her understanding. She grasped the idea quickly, comparing herself to a lantern. She closed her eyes, clutching the stone, trying to recall the sensation from before. Determination tightened her face. Time passed in stillness. Nothing happened. Silence stretched, her confidence wilted. After a long while she sat in the grass, sniffling, insisting she had done it once before. He asked where she had fixed the doll. She pointed to the glass greenhouse. Realization crossed his face. Each mage had a place that matched them best, he said, and suggested trying there. Inside the vast glass structure, light filtered through panes onto rows of plants. He confirmed this was the place. She ran ahead eagerly. He noted how far it was from the house, then had her try again at a table in the center. She doubted the difference, seeing only flowers and glass, but closed her eyes and searched her memory. At first there was nothing. Then feelings resurfaced. Desperation to fix the doll, the safety she felt beside him, the strange weightless flow in her palm like liquid moving both down and up at once. The stone suddenly burst into bright golden light. Her eyes flew open in shock and joy. She turned to him to celebrate, but stopped. He sat bathed in the glow, face shadowed by deep, distant sorrow. She called to him, worried. He startled back to the present. She ran over and proudly showed the shining stone. He examined it, noting it was not at full brightness but praising her success. He explained the greenhouse suited her energy, making control easier, and said they would practice there. She asked what that meant. He described how every mage had places or attributes aligned with them, sometimes tied to personal meaning. His gaze drifted again as wind rustled the roses overhead. Pram arrived with tea. She waved, wishing he would stay, while Kiltz poured. Cup warm in her hands, happiness overflowed. Praise, magic, sunlight through glass, flowers everywhere. She felt like royalty in a story. Remembering a rumor, she mentioned hearing he created the garden. He paused, then confirmed quietly. She spun in her seat, admiring the plants and glass walls, calling it beautiful. A small, wistful smile touched his face. She looked up at the yellow blossoms above and, with simple curiosity, asked if he liked flowers. Kiltz answered her question about the flowers with calm indifference, saying he neither liked nor disliked them and had made the garden on a whim. His cold tone made Asha flinch. Silence stretched between them until she gathered the courage to ask something personal, whether she resembled someone he once knew. He admitted she did. When she asked who, he looked away and said it was an old acquaintance. She pressed, asking if the resemblance was strong. He confirmed it was so strong he had almost mistaken her for that person. When she asked where that person was now, he revealed she was dead. The words hit Asha hard. Tears spilled before she understood why she was crying. She realized he had called her by that name when they first met and that their meeting had been coincidence. She just happened to look like someone he had lost. She apologized for bringing it up carelessly. He admitted he had not wanted to talk about the woman, especially not with Asha, and lowered himself to her level, asking forgiveness. She noticed his trembling hands and covered them with hers, forcing a bright smile to ease the mood. He smiled back gently and promised to be more considerate. Inside, however, Asha hid a painful question, whether he would have taken her in if she had not resembled that woman. After that day, the topic was never mentioned again. Later at breakfast, Asha ate heartily while Kiltz watched her with concern. He asked if she had any worries, but she avoided answering by stuffing her cheeks. She decided it was easier if she alone pretended not to know. Soon her mood lifted as she excitedly thought about lessons. A montage of study, writing practice, and physical training followed. Back at the table, Kiltz announced he would teach her something new and told her to come to the study that afternoon. Surprised she was allowed inside, Asha grew determined and excited, imagining finally using her writing skills. That afternoon she stood outside the study, picturing a grand, sparkling library. Instead, she found a dusty disaster of books and papers piled everywhere. Kiltz sat calmly amid the mess. When she asked if someone else had made it, he said he had been alone. He searched for an automatic flag pen, checking drawers and stacks, but could not find it. Though he claimed the mess was an ideal arrangement, he eventually gave up, deciding to leave it for another day and not send her to the the even messier attic. As Asha rested her hand on a stack of books, Kiltz noticed the glowing sigil on her palm had nearly faded. He asked about her practice in the greenhouse. She said she had some success but still felt blocked when trying to use magic on her own, as if a transparent wall stood in the way. He told her that sensation was correct. The sigil he had drawn acted as a conduit between her and the surrounding mana, and even skilled mages needed spells to use magic. Picking up a quill, he began writing on parchment, explaining that from today he would teach her a common northern spell. Asha watched, slightly overwhelmed, as he continued writing, knowing she would now have to learn real spell work. Kiltz held up a parchment covered in complex ancient script. Asha stared, shock wiping out her earlier confidence. The characters meant nothing to her. He explained it was an old language from the ivory tower and that spells were normally memorized. When she asked if writing many spells meant she could use magic anytime, he told her each spell was disposable and had to be rewritten, so memorization was essential. Sitting at the desk, he gave her a quill and blank paper as homework and began teaching her how to form the first ancient character, offering another tool if the pen felt difficult. She then asked when she would be able to use magic without drawing spells. Confused, he said no one could. She pointed out that he could. He fell silent, then admitted he was an exception. By evening, the sky outside glowed purple and orange. Asha proudly showed her completed work. Kiltz praised her effort, though her handwriting was extremely messy, and mentally noted to correct it next time. While wandering the cluttered study, she noticed a large object under a white cloth. Kiltz uncovered a brass telescope, explaining it was a magical observation device that amplified sight through special glass. She looked through it as he adjusted the focus and asked how far it could see. He said it could see stars and guided her to the North Star of Asite. The image appeared faint and blurry. He told her the clarity depended on the user's magical power, so she would see better once she grew stronger. He then pointed out a bright star called Alshan and explained it appeared briefly in the northern sky at the start of summer but was considered the brightest star in the south. When she asked if the skies differed between north and south, he said they were completely different and even time was calculated differently there. He described how Alshan's appearance created a hazy darkness that made southerners believe the sun rose and set twice a day. Asha's eyes shone with wonder, and she said she wanted to see it herself someday. Kiltz watched her, conflicted, thinking it might be better if she never learned about the wider world. He reflected that human curiosity often became something that hurt the one who held it, but he stayed silent. Asha, meanwhile, imagined distant marvels she had heard of: the White Desert, the 7 islands of Azumaken, the Great Labyrinth of Egaran, and the Ivory Tower at the end of the North Sea. The world felt vast, and she felt small, yet she still wanted to know more and go there. Kiltz told her that in the Ivory Tower there was a massive observation machine far greater than the small telescope, and that this one was only a replica. When she asked why such a device existed, he explained the tower had originally been built as an observatory before it became known as a magic tower. He then said the wizards of the Ivory Tower were still missing. Puzzled, she listened as he spoke of Ingram, described as an irresistible pull of the soul, a longing for the unknown, a kind of original taboo. Though interpretations differed, everyone agreed it was a yearning for a place to return to. He said the wizards gathered as observers, watching the sea where a golden bird had once flown, hoping someday to reach that distant place. His hand rested lightly on the telescope as wind moved through the room and silence settled. At last he told Asha it was time to sleep. Drowsy, she said goodnight and left. He remained alone, gazing at the night sky. Outside the door, Asha paused, thinking she finally understood him and believing he must miss the one called Ingram. Asha rushed into the bedroom with a red book, asking Pram to read before bed. Though it was late, he agreed to a short story and reminded her she had to sleep right after. She cheered. He opened the book and read an old tale about a giant dragon sleeping in darkness on the back of the world. One day the dragon opened his eyes and saw a golden feathered bird, a being he had never seen. The bird followed him, wings scattering light. Pram finished with a heavy yawn and told her to sleep. Curious, she asked where he was born and if he was from the north. He only smiled, tucked her in, and left the question unanswered as the room grew quiet. Later in the study, the mood was harsh. Kiltz crossed his arms and rejected her assignment. Asha looked ready to cry, but he firmly criticized her interpretation of a section on magic theory and the 5 elements, asking if she thought it was a storybook. She tried to defend herself, saying she thought the meaning would connect. He dismantled her reasoning with a sharp analogy, showing the logic did not work. She slumped over the desk in defeat, thinking he turned into a demon king during lessons. Sensing her frustration, he explained he pushed her because he believed she could handle it. She burst out that normal people could not memorize a whole book in 3 days. Calmly, he asked for the pen. He rewrote the material at frightening speed. She stared, stunned, feeling he had forgotten she was only 10. He handed back the page and told her to reread the theory section and build a proper formula. As he moved away, he assigned more work, classifying and analyzing 12 components of magic stones, and said he would return in 2 hours. Trembling, she realized he saw through her attempts to play dumb. He added that her fundamentals were inefficient and marked corrections before leaving her alone. Exhausted, she drooped over the desk, sipping a red drink to stay awake. Her thoughts drifted to Pram. She wondered aloud if Pram had learned magic from Kiltz and recalled the greenhouse incident, realizing he was not a natural mage. Nearby, Kiltz explained that Pram Pram had affinity with the doll because Pram himself was an automatic doll. She froze. He continued, saying that in the garden Pram had only acted as a vessel. She had been the caster. Shock and guilt flooded her as she protested that she had never known Pram was a doll. She thought about how human he seemed and asked if he would die when his magic ran out. Kilt said he would only cease functioning if his mana core broke. She asked if that could be repaired. He answered that even he could not fix it because Pram was not built with ordinary technology but with power from the back of the world. Seeing her confusion deepen, he told her to stop dwelling on it and return to her lesson. She puffed her cheeks in frustration and glared at him. He called her picky, then suddenly laughed. First a chuckle, then genuine laughter. She stared, surprised, then felt lighter seeing him laugh. He wiped a tear of laughter away and told her to begin studying. Outside, Haskin overheard and thought his old friend had finally lost his mind. The next morning felt bright. Kilt sat at breakfast wearing a daisy crown. Haskin gave approval while Asha and Pram held bouquets for the day of giving flowers to their master. Haskin remarked that though Kilt's was her master, he and Pram were her friends too, and asked if she wanted to go out and make more friends. She hesitated, then looked hopefully at Kilt's, wishing she could attend school. He deliberately looked away. Haskin silently cursed him for it and declared that if she could not go to school, he would tell stories about Kilt's time as a teacher. Asha lit up with excitement. Kilt's shot Haskin a warning glare. Haskin teased that Kilt's had been far scarier in the royal family days. Kilt's pretended not to know what he meant. Asha added that he had been stricter back then. Haskin laughed, recalling people who once bet on making Kilt's laugh. Then Asha suddenly asked if Haskin was a noble too. He denied it, saying he had never received a title. While she continued pressing for answers, Asha asked how they knew each other. Cutlery clinked in the silence. Kilt's finally said Haskin had worked at the Cauldron's court. Trying to understand, Asha asked if that meant he was not a noble. Haskin laughed, saying nobles always had attendants, and Kilt's was not a noble either, only appointed as a wizard. Asha then asked why nobles were nobles at all. Haskin said there was no real reason. When she pressed, Kilt's answered with dry bitterness that humans could not live without ranking each other. He criticized Astir for preaching equality while clinging to rigid class divisions, mocking their pride in using ancient relics they had merely picked up. Asha latched onto the unfamiliar term and asked about the relics of Egeron. Haskin pushed Kilt's to explain. Kilt's tried to brush it off as long and complicated, but Asha insisted, so he began. 50 years earlier, magic had been a mystery to most people. Then someone broke into the great palace of Egeron beyond the northern mountains, a forbidden place hidden by nobles. Asha mentioned rumors of dragons guarding it. Haskin confirmed the stories. Kilt's continued that the intruders emerged with a treasure known as the Relic of Egeron. The relic let ordinary people sense mana. Asha was amazed. Haskin added that with its power the central city, states unified into what became Astir, supplying goods and raising taxes, shifting the political balance and costing him his standing with Cauldron. He pointed out that the central region had grown into the continent's largest nation in only half a century. Kilt's darkly remarked that Astir's great nobles now strutted proudly thanks to stolen power. Yet his expression softened with distant sadness as he murmured that it might still be good if more people could use magic. Asha noticed the change and quietly called his name. He snapped back to himself. Haskin broke the mood by urging her to finish eating, and Kilt's abruptly left the table. Later, Asha trudged down the hall buried under a stack of assignments. Grumbling inside, Haskin encouraged her to go demand less homework, cheering her on as she marched to the study. She peeked in and saw Kilt sitting by the window staring at a small box. An idea struck. She ran in and jumped into his lap, startling him, then opened a book and asked about the story of the giant dragon and the golden bird. He asked if she liked it. Proud of her progress, she began reading aloud about the dragon chasing the golden bird named Ingram across the sky. Her voice softened as the tale turned tragic. The dragon lost strength, collapsed, and at death still looked toward the place where the bird had flown, eyes fixed on the sea of stars. Kilt's praised her smooth reading. When he shifted toward her magic homework, she pouted. Amused, he told her to finish it tomorrow since it was late. She relaxed against him, giggling. He looked down at her peacefully. When she asked what he was thinking, he teased about tomorrow's homework. She protested and left for bed while he wished her good night. In the dark hallway, she realized she had forgotten books and turned back. Near a closed door, she heard muffled sobbing. Through a crack, she saw Kilt's kneeling in moonlight, shoulders shaking as he cried. Shock froze her. She wanted to go in and comfort him but stopped, knowing he would not want to be seen like that, and quietly walked away. Sometime later, she returned to his room with a box of cleaning supplies, imagining Pram had told her to help. The room was empty. She set the box down and noticed a daisy flower crown preserved on the desk, the one she had given him months ago. Nearby hung a bundle of dried yellow flowers. The sight triggered a violent memory. Later, she and Pram sat on the wooden porch eating cake. Pram mentioned that someone had picked up something Asha once lost and kept it without telling her. Asha frowned, not understanding. Pram explained that to that person, the item was too important to return. Asha hugged her knees, grumbling inwardly that it had not even been special. The garden gate creaked. Kilt's walked in, and her mood brightened instantly. He approached and handed her a small red package wrapped with string, having saved it to give her. After that, they sat beneath a large tree. Asha opened the attached letter and carefully read the warm message inside, filled with hopes that her future path of exploration would lead her to beautiful things. Kilt's watched quietly, thinking about about how nearly a year had passed since she came to live there. She unwrapped the gift and found a dark robe. He helped her put it on, adjusting it with awkward care. She had expected toys or simple clothes, then remembered the tradition of magical robes given to wizards. This one was not a formal robe, just something for everyday wear. Nervous, he added that she did not have to wear it if she disliked it. She immediately clung to his arm, upset that he would think that way, and smiled brightly in thanks. She knelt on the grass, admiring the hem. Kiltz noticed how long her hair had grown and asked to tie it. She stayed still while he tried. After some fumbling, he stopped. Her reflection showed a complete mess. He admitted the failure was due to his lack of skill, not her. She burst into laughter, delighted to discover there was something he could not do. He looked away, embarrassed but gentle. 6 years later, the forest cabin stood unchanged. Asha, now 17, returned with groceries, pram beside her. Inside, Haskin rocked in his chair. She cheerfully showed him the pickled chestnuts she bought, but his gaze sharpened past her. Mana flickered in his eyes as he looked into the recent past and realized someone had followed her. Asha stiffened, trying to brush it off. Just then, a door opened and Kiltz stepped out, looking the same as before. He sensed her tension and lightly questioned what she was hiding. Panic fluttered in her chest as she hugged the bag tighter. Outside the gate stood a blonde man with glasses and luggage, already watching them. Excitement radiated from him. Kiltz recognized him immediately, his expression turning flat. The man rushed forward with overflowing joy, claiming to be Kiltz's returning disciple. Kiltz stated coldly that he did not remember anyone like him. The man looked crushed. Asha glanced between them in confusion and asked how he got there when he was supposed to be in Astir. He began rambling about travel and sensing familiar mana, but Kiltz cut him off and demanded a short explanation. The man pointed directly at Asha, admitting he had followed her. Her blood ran cold under Kiltz's sharp stare. Kiltz dismissed him with icy indifference, saying the answer would be no regardless. Haskin sighed and told the man to at least eat before leaving. The man quickly accepted. Haskin studied him more closely and recognized him, irritation surfacing. The man then noticed Haskin too and commented on how much time had passed. Haskin grumbled that his face had not changed and implied he was benefiting from Egeron's relics. The man cheerfully admitted he was bound by a harsh magical contract in exchange for a professorship at Yfranger, insisting it was worth it for the path of magic. The name struck Asha deeply. She remembered her long-held dream of entering Yfranger. Hope and disbelief tangled inside her as she stared at him and asked if he truly was a professor there. Smiling proudly, he introduced himself as Professor Martin Uris, head of magical biology at Yfranger. The meal continued in a warm, crowded atmosphere. Asha turned her curiosity toward their guest and asked about his past with Kiltz. Martin flustered, waving his hands as he explained he had only been an assistant when Kiltz served as a royal mage. He tried to recall his age back then, settling awkwardly on 21 and admitting he had been inexperienced. Asha was surprised someone so young had held that role. Martin described himself back then as a helpless beginner who could not even form proper formulas, then clarified the mage idiom when she looked confused. Conversation shifted when she asked Kiltz's age. Martin stiffened, glanced at Kiltz, then dodged the answer with nervous humor, implying it was better left unsaid. Asha caught on quickly, and he praised her sharpness, comparing her favorably to his current students. She eagerly asked about Efrings and its unusual magical theory. Martin seemed surprised Kiltz had not explained. He described the belief that the caster was not the fifth element. Artifacts were. He checked that she knew of the artifacts of Egeron, then explained that Astiaean magic relied on tools embedded with them, allowing ordinary people to wield power. He spoke with admiration, calling it a blessing that broke the monopoly of innate talent. Asha agreed with bright excitement. Haskin smirked at how well they got along. Asha then asked if Kiltz was truly that great. Martin answered without hesitation, calling him a living legend and unmatched, though he warned his teaching style was brutal. Asha gently defended Kiltz, saying the lessons were hard but manageable. Martin suddenly burst with old grievances, protesting how strict Kiltz had been with him. Kiltz calmly replied that he could resume those lessons anytime. Martin immediately fell silent. Later, discussion turned serious. Martin tried to bring up important matters, but Kiltz cut him off, already aware Asti was recruiting skilled mages regardless of birth. When Martin cautiously hinted at war, Haskin shut it down as classified, leaving Martin deflated. Then Martin brightened, realizing Asha's age matched school entry. He suggested she apply to Efrings and even offered to write a recommendation, confident a student of Kiltz would be accepted. Asha's heart pounded with hope. Kiltz refused instantly. The air froze. Asha stared at him in disbelief as he stood, firm and unyielding, then walked out into the night. She chased him into the garden and pleaded her case. He argued the school only trained estate aides. She insisted she wanted to see the artifacts and understand that magic firsthand. He dismissed it as inferior imitation and said he could teach her himself, demanding a real reason. She fired back with his own lesson about experience being different from study. He turned grave, warning the world was cruel and people would scorn her birth. She trembled but said she could endure it. His voice broke as he admitted he could not endure seeing her hurt. Frustration and hurt exploded from her. She shouted that her pain should not control him, then ran back to the house in tears, feeling treated like a child. Kiltz remained alone in the dark. Later, in his study, he sat in silence until Haskin entered and bluntly told him to let her go. Kiltz worried influential figures might recognize her. Haskin dismissed that and and accused him of hiding the truth for selfish reasons. He revealed Asha often lingered outside the town school, longing. Kiltz finally confessed his fear of losing her if she left. Haskin scoffed and suggested he go with her as a professor. Kiltz refused, tired of that life. Haskin argued their home was safer than her past, but still not a cage, free paradise. Kiltz's control cracked. He admitted he wanted to shield her from every darkness in the world. Haunted by a past failure he refused to repeat. Haskin called him insane and reminded him Asha was a person, not something to keep sheltered with comfort alone. Kiltz slammed his fist onto the desk. Kiltz's restraint shattered. Haskin stood firm in the gloom, unshaken, voice tired but immovable. He said arguments would not change anything. The past hung heavy between them, old wounds neither had forgotten. Haskin leaned on his cane, admitting he was too old to fight the same battle again. But he reminded Kiltz of the debt still owed. They had both agreed on it long ago. His proposal was simple and final: send Asha to school and consider the debt repaid. Regret and bitterness colored his words as he spoke of a life already spent, of being a relic running on borrowed time. Asha's future, he insisted, was too precious to let wither in isolation. Kiltz remained silent, half hidden in shadow, absorbing every word. Morning brought fragile brightness. Martin cheerfully prepared to depart, explaining he needed the official seal from his office for Asha's recommendation letter. He promised to meet her in Berlin in a week. Asha thanked him warmly and watched him disappear down the path. When she turned back toward the house, she noticed Kiltz watching from an upstairs window. Despite everything, she lifted her hand in a small wave. He spun away and shut the curtain. The rejection stung. Hurt twisted into frustration, and she marched inside, only to nearly collide with him in the hallway. Pride held her spine straight as she swept past without a word. Once inside her room with the door locked, her anger faltered, replaced by the unsettling memory of sorrow in his eyes. A week later, she packed her suitcase on the floor. Pram hovered beside her, trying to add comforts that would not fit, eyes glossy with unshed tears. She hugged him tightly, promising letters and safe return. Haskin grumbled nearby, masking his worry with complaints. At the gate, farewells grew awkward and tender. Pram clung to her one last time. Haskin stiffly wished her well, then suddenly pulled her into a rough embrace, face red as he barked at her not to get sentimental. She laughed and hugged him back, thanking him for everything. He muttered advice about standing strong and studying hard. She stepped forward, then halted as a tall shadow fell across her path. Kiltz stood there in dark robes, solemn and composed. He handed her a black box etched with gold, a magical device for sending private letters. Ordinary correspondence, he warned, would be inspected. She realized he had crafted the complex spell work himself. It was against school rules, but he dismissed that. He said he would escort her to Berlin. They walked through the forest under shifting sunlight, silence thick between them. She tried to ease the tension, suggesting the gift felt like a peace offering. He stopped walking. Wind stirred the trees and lifted his hair as he confessed the truth. He still did not want to send her away. If it were only up to him, he would have taken her home and never let her leave. Only strict self-restraint held him back. The intensity in his voice sent a chill through her. Then his expression softened with quiet resignation. He reminded her of his promise to give her anything she truly wanted. She remembered telling him she wanted school, friends, and to learn new magic beyond the forest. He warned she might one day realize that the answers she sought were not as precious as she believed, that some knowledge only brought pain. Even so, he asked her again, gently but seriously, why she wanted this so badly. Asha reminding Kiltz of the lessons he once gave her about seeking beauty and exploring the vast, secret-filled world. Holding on to his own words, she expressed her wish to leave and discover those wonders for herself. Kiltz looked down at her with quiet resignation and fondness, fully aware of her unshakable resolve. After a pause, he gave permission, but imposed one strict condition. She must never speak of him at the academy or reveal she had been his student. Understanding his need for secrecy, Asha readily agreed. She held his hands warmly, grateful and excited, promising to write often and return when the term ended. He squeezed back, silently accepting her departure while already anticipating her letters. Later, in the bustling city, Asha waved a bright farewell while Kiltz watched from a distance. Professor Martin Uras now stood beside her as her escort. With one last look back, she turned toward the future. At the Grand Train station, Asha stared in awe at the massive, ornate structure. Martin, amused, explained the rail system was still incomplete, with tracks currently reaching only Astia's borders but planned to extend across the Great Grasslands to eastern Nurlmaz. Curious, Asha asked why such vast routes were needed. Martin explained that efficient transport of goods was the foundation of prosperity. As they walked, he greeted a passing woman with a term unfamiliar to Asha. Inside the luxurious carriage, Asha's eyes sparkled as she took in the elegant interior. She asked about the word he had used. Martin explained it was an Astian term for an unmarried young woman, with a male counterpart, though he brushed off applying it to himself. Noting customs differed in his northern homeland, growing hesitant, Martin admitted he was struck by how closely Asha resembled someone he once knew. He asked whether Kiltz had mentioned it. Asha, slightly uneasy, acknowledged that Kiltz and others had said the same. Martin reflected that resemblance was too mild a word and revealed her face had startled him when they first met. He remembered a woman with identical golden hair and eyes. When Asha confirmed that Kiltz had called the woman merely an acquaintance, Martin showed doubt, implying the bond had been far deeper and likely tied to the royal court. He stopped himself before saying more, and instead praised Asha's sharp thinking, saying she would do well at the academy. Suggesting she rest, Martin was surprised when Asha pulled out a book instead. He recognized it as a children's tale about the great dragon and Ingram, adding that studying thinking magic gave it new meaning. Seeing her confusion, he explained the story was actually disguised mage history. In the north, where dragon worship lingered, mages were called inheritors of the dragon's bloodline, and the tale connected to the founding of Cauldron. He recounted how 1,000 years ago the first mage, the Grey Pilgrim, wandered as an outcast until forming a pact and friendship with an ancestor of the Cauldron's royal line. Together they founded Cauldron. Some believed the pilgrim chose that line because the first king's name echoed the legendary Ingram. After helping conquer the north, the mage gave the king a final gift, a mysterious pass to the Sea of Stars. No one knew what it was, only that mages were said to yearn for it. The mage later departed for that place, and the grieving king built an observatory on the Cape of Futility to watch for his return, a structure that would become the Ivory Tower. Martin concluded that history and legend had blurred over time. As the train rolled on, Martin fell asleep. Asha watched the landscape slide past until a delicate yet immensely complex spell washed over the carriage. She realized they had entered Astia. Sitting quietly, she reflected on her new life ahead. Asha drifted into a hazy memory, thinking about a past talk with Kiltz, trying and failing to recall his exact words. The steady rattle of the wheels filled the carriage as she rested against the window and dozed. Outside, fields blurred past in green and gold while a radiant golden bird glided alongside the speeding train. Professor Martin's voice pulled her awake. Disoriented, she blinked and realized they had arrived. She leaned out eagerly and froze at the sight of a vast white castle rising from the water, mountains cradling it. This was Efrang's. As the train approached, Martin explained the academy had once been a Cauldron monastery. Its shape reflected northern architecture, but Astian renovations covered it in brilliant white. Overwhelmed by the scale, Asha wondered if all of it was used for classes. Martin clarified that less than half served education. The rest handled ceremonies and official affairs. The train stopped. They entered through busy grounds where students in blue and white uniforms passed by. Asha asked about them, and Martin realized she needed one too, promising to find a tailor after they stopped by his office. His office was warm and orderly. While he prepared tea, Asha remarked that she had expected a mage's study to be messy, thinking of Kiltz. Martin was stunned, having known Kiltz as obsessively neat. He brushed it off as change over time, then handed her enrollment papers and sent her to the dormitory for check-in with Miss Ruth. Outside the towering dorms, excitement burst from Asha. That joy collapsed inside the office when Miss Ruth, stern and precise, rejected her paperwork as insufficient. She questioned Aisha, then focused on her guardian. Learning Professor Eurus was only an acting guardian, Ruth demanded official proof connecting Asha to her real guardian. Asha had none. Panic rose as Ruth declared the registration invalid without it. Asha asked what she should do. Ruth insisted on a certificate verifying her relationship with her true guardian. The demand felt impossible. Kiltz was far away in Kalinja. Footsteps interrupted. A red-haired boy in uniform entered, noticed the tension, and asked what was wrong. After hearing the situation, he reviewed the documents and pointed out Asha was admitted under a special process. He argued the papers were valid and that demanding distant documents would leave her stranded. He pressed Ruth to be reasonable, reminding her of a favor he had done. After a long pause, she relented. Outside, relief left Asha lightheaded. She thanked him, but he shrugged it off and suggested Ruth had simply been difficult. Then he asked if she remembered him. She studied his face until memory clicked. A boy from years ago at the Mountain Jewel Inn by Lake Arindon. He brightened, introducing himself as Linzio. He said his family still talked about that day, especially his mother, who had been fascinated by the mage traveling with Asha. He asked about him. Startled, Asha nearly said Kiltz's name before catching herself and calling him only her teacher, silently reminding herself to be careful. Linzio accepted that easily and, balancing along a low wall, casually added that Asha's special admission was extremely rare, especially for the senior class, making her presence at Efrang's anything but ordinary. Asha explained that Professor Eurus knew her teacher and had written her recommendation. Linzio jolted at the name, recognizing the magical biology professor, then warned her that the man could be far more intense than his soft, flower garden image suggested. She admitted she didn't know much about him. Linzio studied her, then bluntly asked if she was a commoner. She said yes and instantly regretted it, bracing for noble disgust. Instead, he burst into laughter, nearly offended she'd think he cared. His family's title was recent, he said, and meaningless. Relief warmed her face. Her bright smile hit him like a physical blow, leaving him flustered and gulping. He hurriedly suggested introducing his friend. Seconds later, panic. A strict staff member was coming. Linzio shoved her under a bed without explanation. From the dust and darkness she listened to him get scolded like a delinquent. When it was safe, she crawled out dazed and met Mahiran, his calm, long-suffering friend. The truth spilled fast. Linzio had bribed Miss Muth with a rare book to smooth over Ash's dorm problem. A book he had borrowed permanently from Mahiran. Mahiran scolded him with exhausted fury but apologized to Asha, insisting Linzio was an idiot, not evil. They escorted her to the dorm. Apparently, academic administration could be defeated with literature. Later, alone in her room, Asha reflected. Linzio was the grandson of the Count from Lake Arindon. His grandfather had been injured on that trip and was still bedridden. Cold realization crept in. Kiltz had likely been the cause. Her stomach dropped. She swore never to mention her teacher's name to Linzia, and decided Kiltz never needed to know about this connection either. She opened the window, breathing in the cool air, trying to focus on the thrill of new friends and a new life. That night she wrote to Kiltz. She admitted adjusting was harder than expected and that his lessons didn't always match the academy's ways. Frustration slipped out, she scratched it away, replacing honesty with cheerful lies about pretty scenery and kind classmates. The second she she finished, guilt crushed her. She collapsed onto the desk, calling herself an idiot. Her thoughts drifted back to the first day of class. She had stood alone in a buzzing classroom until Linzio waved wildly, Mahiran beside him. Relief nearly buckled her knees. Then the teacher arrived and assigned a refresher exercise, illuminate a mana stone in pairs. Everyone matched up instantly. Asha panicked until a freckled boy offered to partner with her. She introduced herself as a transfer student. The teacher dropped a mana stone into her hand, almost identical to the one Kiltz had used years ago. Confidence surged. She poured mana into it. Light detonated. A blinding flash blasted through the window and lit the outer castle wall like a beacon. When the glare faded, the room was silent. Dozens of stunned faces stared. Asha stood frozen, horror rising, realizing she might have just introduced herself to the entire academy in the loudest way possible. Memory surfaced Professor Martin in his office, holding out a silver-handled wand and a winged insignia that had belonged to a withdrawn student. He urged her to use them daily in practice during the break. When she questioned using magic without a wand, he nervously explained the prejudice she would face, especially toward northern wizards, and warned her about hereditary mages. Back in the classroom, the warning hit too late. She had forgotten. Whispers spread, eyes filled with suspicion and curiosity, rumors linking her to a recent vacancy and special admission. The weight of attention pressed down until the bell rang, snapping the moment but not the shame. At her desk, she fumbled with her books, tense until Linzio knocked and bluntly asked if she was a hereditary mage. She braced for distance but found excitement instead. Mahiran thoughtfully connected her wandless casting to her background. She admitted she never used wands at home and had forgotten the norm. Even in the north, Mahiran noted, hereditary mages were rare. Linzio brushed off the gossip, but the halls told a harsher truth. Students avoided her, whispers trailing wherever she walked. Still, she found warmth watching Linzio and Mahiran bicker over parfits, grateful not to be alone. That night she wrote to Kiltz, choosing to focus on her new friends, describing Linzio's brightness and Mahiran's princely politeness. She sealed the letter in a magic box, reassuring them she was doing well. Later, in her new uniform, she felt a fragile sense of belonging, until she got lost again searching for the library. Passing a fountain, she noticed 3 boys fall silent. One was from her class. Their stares followed her. She tried to pass politely, but a foot shot out. She stumbled, caught herself, turned to a smirk and a threat. Confusion gave way to anger as accusations flew. Spy, thief, backward northerner. She fired back, correcting her homeland, fists clenched, face burning. The boy mocked her status. Her wand implied theft. A calm female voice cut through the tension, reminding them that fighting on school grounds was forbidden. The boys blanched and retreated. A pale pink-haired girl with sharp purple eyes remained. She coolly offered to report their friendly conversation to the dean, sending them running. She called them fools, then checked on Asha with dry bluntness. They exchanged names. Chloe Lumiere, her dorm neighbor. Relief and delight flickered through Asha. Chloe dusted off her skirt and told her she stood out, whether she realized it or not. Sitting by the fountain, Chloe explained the truth. Special admission was extraordinarily rare, beyond even top nobles. Rumors painted Asha as hidden royalty or descended from legendary mages. Horror dawned. Everyone thought she had cheated her way in. Worse, they were waiting for her exam scores. Pressure crushed her, but Chloe reframed it. Attention meant power. It could turn to admiration if she learned to wield it. Power always had a price. Asha listened, awed by her composure. They agreed to call each other by name. Then Linzio waved from afar. Chloe's expression cooled instantly. She excused herself and left. Linzio asked if she understood who the girl they had seen was. He explained that Chloe was the reason Asha missed them at the library and mentioned her nickname, Stuffed Angel, given for her overwhelming beauty. Asha learned that everyone at Efrings knew Chloe and quietly wondered if noble children were raised to turn attention into admiration. Midterm results were posted. Dalkian Franje Luail DA ranked first with 998, and Asha Konak followed with 996. Furious Alam and Dorothy Beatus came next. Asha froze in shock. She had been confident about arcane studies, so doubt crept in about other subjects. The 2-point gap frustrated her deeply, and she pulled at her hair in distress. Students whispered about the transfer student placing second. Embarrassment weighed on her as she imagined Kiltz's disappointment. She resolved to work harder and decided to begin revising after seeing Kitty. She soon found a black cat resting on a pink heart-patterned cloth. She knelt to pet it gently, smiling as it purred and leaned into her hand. She offered it a snack, wondering if it ate human food. A voice called her name. She turned to a blonde boy who confirmed she was Asha Konak. She recognized Dalkian Amadou and questioned why he was asking when they shared a class. His expression stayed cold. Expecting an insult, she listed reasons he might dislike her. Hereditary mage, transfer student, commoner among nobles. He dismissed all of them, then walked away, saying she irritated him. He warned her to be more mindful of her grades and not draw his attention again. Confusion and anger surged as she shouted after him. Background followed about the Amadou family. Their crest symbolized a dragon slayer. Luail Amadou had helped build Astaya, spread magic to the public, founded Efrings, and now served as dean, known as the Conqueror of Wonder. Dalkian was his grandson. At breakfast, Linzio connected Dalkian to the dean. Asha studied while eating, slamming her book down in fierce determination. She declared she had to surpass Dalkian. Linzio wondered how he was good at everything. He explained Dalkian descended from the 12 adventurers who founded the nation and killed the dragon in the Great Labyrinth, shifting power toward Centralwin. Asha felt defeated, unable to grasp such perfection when even Kiltz had flaws. She thought of Kiltz taking a year to find a quill and being terrible at cooking. Lauder lightened the mood. Dalkian might be unbearable, but his behavior felt inevitable. Maharan agreed. Linzio admitted many girls admired Dalkian Dakian as the ideal noble. Asha rejected that instantly, calling him ugly. Linzio teased that maybe she only liked Chloe for her face. She flinched and denied it, blushing. Linzio described the kind of girl he liked: bright smile, warm presence, honest heart, golden hair. He reacted with sudden realization while looking at her, but she missed the hint and insisted she would never like someone like Dakian. Linzio slumped in defeat. That night, a glowing magical box appeared in Asha's room with a letter from Kiltz. Chloe visited her. They sat together laughing as Chloe admired Asha's nails. Conversation turned to Dakian. Chloe suggested he was not always terrible and could be polite. Asha read Kiltz's letter. He called her clever and thoughtful. Haskin still complained about his back, and Fram missed her more often. Both were healthy. He was glad she had made friends and advised her to ignore cold students. Chloe gently pointed out that while people judged heritage, many still saw Dakian as highly eligible. The idea made Asha freeze. Chloe believed Asha saw good in everything. She held Asha's hands, wishing her precious experiences at Efrings and a happy future with someone kind. She compared humans to grains of sand, messy up close, beautiful from afar, and encouraged her to find mutual love. A faint sadness touched Chloe's smile. Asha sensed it and offered help if she ever struggled. Chloe thanked her sincerely. The letter ended with Kiltz saying she would have finished autumn exams by then. He awaited her reply and signed with deep affection as her friend and teacher. Students shivered in the academy courtyard. Linzio trembled so hard his teeth rattled, while Asha stood steady, barely affected. He blamed the difference on her northern roots and admitted he had been sleeping with a heating mana stone. She laughed, saying he sounded like her grandfather who used one for aching bones. He protested. Embarrassed, Maharan joined them. Linzio immediately brought up the rumor about private lessons with Professor Mayuzlan. Maharan confirmed it and explained his long interest in magical weaponry. He believed that although too few mages existed to enchant weapons widely, Astai's arcane technology could make mass production possible. Asha listened closely and asked if magic enhancement truly improved weapons. Maharan said it did. She remembered his family had been knights for generations. Maharan agreed and released a faint magical aura around his sword, explaining the Rochestanins were known as the Sword of Caldrigen and that he had trained in northern sword techniques since childhood. Asha realized that was why he held his wand like a sword. Maharan praised her earlier practice, saying her core was stable and her mana control precise. She flushed but insisted she still had far to go. Her attention shifted when she noticed Dakian nearby, surrounded by admiring students as he demonstrated magic. Despite herself, she admitted his skill was flawless. He walked past with easy confidence. She glared at his back, thinking talent did not excuse his personality, then turned back to Maharan and asked him to practice with her. He agreed. She raised her wand. Brilliant golden light formed into a sword-like shape. Maharan watched in awe and admitted envy toward hereditary mages who could wield any element freely. She asked about his element. He explained his aptitude test aligned him with water, so he never studied others. She noted Astai rejected the five-element theory. Unlike the North, she described her belief that a fifth element served as the intersection linking the other four. Maharan shared his teacher's idea that magic came from communication between humans and the world, meaning the spellcaster was essential. Dakian suddenly stepped in, asking if that made the caster the intersecting point. Maharan agreed. Linzio wandered over, asking what they were discussing. Linzio argued that learning multiple elements took too long and focusing on one was more efficient. Asha considered this, realizing practical magic might not be as pointless as Kiltz had implied. Later in the library, Asha reached for a book she thought might help Maharan. Another hand grabbed it first. She turned and found Dakian close behind her. He said he had touched it first and examined the title, Introduction to Advanced Elemental Theory. He questioned whether she even knew what it was and decided to borrow it himself. Frustrated, she stepped away. He called her back. She turned. Tense, he moved closer, blocking her against the shelf. He asked why she was avoiding him. She tried to deflect, then finally burst out that it was because he hated her. He looked genuinely confused and said he had never claimed that. He explained that his remark about the results had been consideration, not hostility. She could not understand his reasoning. He asked her to move so he could pass, then abruptly proposed a competition for the winter exam. The two of them against each other. She stared, bewildered, and asked what they would even be competing for. He answered that for him it would be the honor of the dean, and for her the honor of her teacher. She immediately refused, flustered and overwhelmed. He reminded her that in the North, the bond between student and teacher was considered especially precious. Asha admitted the bond between student and teacher mattered, but she could not see what it had to do with this. Frustration spilled out as she told Dakian she did not understand why he seemed to hate her. She set one condition for the competition. If she won, he had to stop bothering her. He studied her in silence, then accepted. In class, Professor Travian announced the winter exam would be replaced by a practical assignment after Professor Flenner acquired something rare. A cart of speckled eggs rolled in. Students whispered about dragon eggs, then doubted it. Travian revealed they were Upake eggs, distant dragon descendants, and assigned them to dissect one and submit a report. When a student hinted at hatching one instead, she warned against it and showed a brutal illustration of a Upake attack. Unis spread. Asha held her egg carefully, disturbed. Linzio said even graduation exams used dragon parts and noted that she and Maharan, both from the North, would hate this. Maharan suggested it reflected Astai's belief that all mysteries should be exposed, though Upakes were known as docile in the North. Asked if he would dissect his egg, Maharan hesitated. Asha hugged hers, torn. The assignment demanded it, but killing a living creature for grades felt wrong. She could not accept dissecting a dragon subspecies. Guilt won. She decided to let herself fail fail rather than kill it and planned to fake the report. Even imagining Dokyeon mocking her did not change her mind. She chose not to harm the egg. She told her friends she would hatch it instead. Linzeo guessed she had a plan. Maharan trusted she would handle it well. That night she researched Yupakes. A book described them as beautiful creatures of the permafrost with 3 pairs of wings when grown. She searched for hatching instructions but found only that they incubated 1 egg at a time and took 2 months to hatch. With nothing else, she focused on warmth and wrapped the egg in a red scarf. 2 months later, Professor Travian returned her report with disappointment, saying expectations had been higher. Asha felt the sting, knowing she had written nonsense, yet still believing she had no choice. She left the office discouraged. Suddenly Dokyeon grabbed her arm and pulled her down the hall. In a quiet corridor he cornered her and reminded her of their competition. She realized she had forgotten about it while waking constantly to tend the egg and suggested they just count it as her loss. He refused, saying they had not truly competed and calling her report unacceptable. She argued it was the best she could do. He revealed Travian had shown him the report out of concern for her teaching. Embarrassment burned. Pressed for the truth, Asha admitted she never did the assignment because she felt sorry for the egg and fabricated everything. He did not understand sacrificing an exam for that. She asked if he had dissected his egg. He said yes and described analyzing every part without hesitation, seeing no reason for guilt since it was not human. Horror washed over her. She trembled, then kicked him hard in the shin and shouted his name, calling him the worst person she had ever met. He froze, stunned, as she stormed away. Later in the cafeteria, Linzeo laughed at the story, saying that was just how Dokyeon had always been, even as a child unbothered by dead animals. He joked it was like Dokyeon lacked emotions. Asha grumbled that this was why he irritated her so much. Linzeo then grew thoughtful, admitting Dokyeon had not always been that bad. Linzeo kept talking, admitting he once mistook Dokyeon for a girl and paid for it immediately. Back then Dokyeon had shoulder-length hair and a soft, angelic look that fooled him. Thinking it was funny, Linzeo had stolen a hairpin from his mother's jewelry box and offered it to him. The reaction was instant and furious. The pin flew back at his face, and the scuffle exploded into a full fight. Grabbing, kicking, biting, both of them too stubborn to back down. It only ended when their families rushed in and dragged them apart, leaving Linzeo in tears and the memory half embarrassing, half ridiculous. He said they would never have become friends if his grandfather had not forced him to behave. The mention of that grandfather made Asha tense. She fidgeted and carefully asked whether he kept in touch with him. Linzeo explained that contact was forbidden during the semester, though he admitted that when he first arrived he had desperately sent messages home every single day, begging to return. The mood softened. Linzeo reminded her how proud she had been about attending Efrings when they first met in Arinden. Asha brightened, chin resting in her hands, admitting that meeting him back then had been what made her want to come. That confession turned him shy. He revealed he had actually noticed her days before speaking, hoping someone his age could become a friend. He said he was truly glad to see her again at the academy. That night Asha hurried back to her dorm under a deep blue sky, warmth lingering in her chest. The feeling vanished the moment she opened her door and found Professor Travian inside, unhinged. Later, alone, she reflected on Dokyeon's coldness and wondered if the academy itself felt the same. Astaya's magic was extraordinary, with constant research and inventions that improved lives, the city glittering like a beacon of progress and wonder. None of that sounded evil on the surface, yet she could not accept the beliefs at its core. Her gaze moved to the cloth, wrapped egg hidden on her bed. She stroked it gently, pitying the creature inside, the last of its kind. Magic, to her, should remain hidden, protected the way she had once protected Kiltz's secret. There was no need to break the shell. Instead, she opened a loose floorboard and retrieved a blue book. Iskadian's report on how magical power affected the human body. The contents were horrific. Dense mana exposure made ordinary bodies turn against themselves and disintegrate. Experiments described injecting magic into people born without sensitivity, measuring their suffering in the name of countermeasures. One entry detailed a subject writhing in agony from eye pain after injection. Asha slammed the book shut, shaken but not surprised. The handwriting was unmistakable. Kiltz. Snow drifted past her window as she stared at her reflection, exhausted by the knowledge she carried. She had seen enough since coming here that cruelty no longer shocked her, but the thought of someone living so long with such burdens felt unbearably lonely. The next day in the courtyard she spotted Dokyeon and instinctively bristled. Maharan noticed and gently told her not to waste energy on him. She laughed it off and shifted the topic to the approaching Foundation Festival, asking whether Erenville would celebrate. He explained Astai avoided that tradition, likely to distance itself from Cauldron culture, but held a grand spring celebration instead, with a party at the academy. Remembering an errand, Asha said she needed to visit Erenville and would see him next week. Maharan was startled at the idea of travel in heavy snow, but she insisted she was only retrieving parcels from the post office since delivery had failed. He offered to accompany her, and she agreed, unbothered by weather that reminded her of her rugged childhood. As they walked, he remarked that her teacher must be kind to send gifts so far. She admitted it doubled as a birthday present, explaining she had chosen the festival as her birthday because she never knew the real date. Maharan apologized awkwardly, then hesitated before asking about her parents. She shared that she came from Nurlmaz, had lived with a stepfather who found her by the shore, and knew nothing of her origins. She asked about his festival plans, only to learn he expected nothing, being the black sheep of his family. They resented his failure to become a knight and his decision to study abroad. When she asked why he failed, he revealed he could not properly use one arm. It did not hinder daily life, he said, but it kept him from supporting his older brother the way he wished. Lowering his voice, he admitted he shared these thoughts with no one else. He believed Cauldron was heading toward decline unless it adopted Astai's technology. The Ivory Tower mages were gone, the king unfit, and Astai was exploiting the weakness. He believed war with Ismacan was coming. He then mentioned a former student, Inerl d'Armand. Asha remembered hearing she left school, but he corrected that she had been expelled. Her family had spoken against the war, and displeasing the dean had consequences. Expulsion, he implied, was a gentle word for what truly happened. Then Asha stood alone in the sunlit room, thoughtful, wondering if it had once belonged to Inerl d'Armand. She decided to ask Chloe later and opened the package on the bed. Inside was a flower, decorated carrot cake. The note calling her a little star made her recognize Fram's handwriting at once. On the back was another message with a doodle of an old man. She laughed, certain it was from Kiltz. She unwrapped the rest and found a pristine white garment. Believing it was from Kiltz, she hugged the soft fabric and saved it for a special day. A sudden crack split the air. She turned to see the large egg in the corner breaking apart. Fear gripped her as she remembered the warning about her safety and not ending up like the others. Unprepared, she grabbed the new robe, ready to defend herself. The shell burst. A tiny white-winged creature blinked up at her with a soft sound. Her fear dissolved. It looked harmless, adorable. It nuzzled her hand and licked her fingers. She laughed in relief and named it Ease for its snowy color. Time passed. She cleaned her window, then wrote letters at her desk, sensing Kiltz's disappointment that she had not visited home. She paused over what to write and chose not to mention Linzio. Aze nudged her and she took it for a walk, sneaking through halls with it hidden in a bundle. She reached quiet ruins with old pillars and set it down. Ease hopped happily, and she felt proud of finding a place it liked. Suddenly eyes hissed. She scooped it up, urging silence. A voice asked what had upset it. She froze as a blonde man appeared and recognized her. Terror struck. It was Amadeu. She stumbled through an explanation, but he calmly promised to keep her secret. Relief spread across her face. She thanked him and shared the creature's name. An awkward pause followed until he asked about the name. She explained it meant beginning or white snow in the ancient language. He asked if she knew it, and she admitted she knew a little because northern magic used it. She asked what he was doing there, hoping he was not practicing magic. He flinched and admitted he trained there because no one came. She stared, surprised, having thought he never struggled. He explained that hereditary magic had many limits and required preparation, weaker in some ways than arcane technology. She asked again for his promise. He reminded her he had given it. She offered to keep his training spot secret too. They agreed and shook hands. Later in the library, a dark-haired student explained that arcane train rails were made by mixing mana stones into steel. Asha listened while a red-haired boy slept nearby. The student said the project needed huge amounts of mana stones, draining the central coal mine and fueling rumors that Astai wanted a mining deal with Nurlmaz. Asha asked why the railroad mattered so much. He said they claimed it was for exploration, but linking north and south seemed suspicious. He pointed out Ismacan and the Crescent Peninsula on a map, saying relations had worsened after an incident. The red-haired boy woke and asked about it. Talk turned to the southern peninsula. Asha asked if he had been there. He described a land with almost no natural light, darkness even at midday, and a black sea. She was surprised he lived by the sea. He said his home was near the white shores of Elfingur, land and title granted to his grandfather for service to Cauldron. She said she would like to visit, but inside she recognized the name. Count Kaiser, Linzio's grandfather. The thought unsettled her. She felt she should tell Kiltz, yet justified staying silent, thinking secrets went both ways. Later in the corridor, a girl asked if she had chosen her grandier. She had not. The girl urged her to hurry. Students passed carrying boxes as Asha walked on. She saw Linzio leaving a room and started to call out, but stopped. A pink-haired girl stood before him, fidgeting and blushing as she worked up the courage to invite him to the spring celebration party. Linzio sat frozen at the table, looking completely stunned and unsure how to react to the sudden invitation. Standing in the doorway, Asha's jaw dropped, her eyes widening in pure disbelief at what she had just walked in on. She stared at the two of them, her mind screaming in shock at the unexpected confession. In the middle of a lively classroom, a pink-haired girl nervously approaches Linzio while her friends squeal and cheer her on from behind. Even Asha looks confused as the girl struggles to speak. Before she can finish, Linzio abruptly shoots to his feet, nearly knocking over his desk, and blurts out a frantic apology. Flustered and red-faced, he explains that he can't accept her invitation because he's already planning to attend the spring celebration party with someone else. Though embarrassed, he thanks her sincerely, saying he feels honored she even asked. The girl handles the rejection with grace, but not before casting a meaningful glance at Asha as her friends usher her away, consoling her with talk of plenty of other fish in the sea. Asha immediately teases Linzio about his unexpected popularity, curious about who he's supposedly going with. To her surprise, he admits he hasn't actually asked the person yet. After an awkward pause, he leans closer, cheeks burning, and shyly asks Asha if she would be his grandier for the spring celebration party. Completely caught off guard, she double-checks that he's truly inviting her. When he nods firmly, she breaks into a bright smile and happily agrees. Linzio silently celebrates, visibly relieved. Excited, he instantly begins coordinating outfits, suggesting rose or gold would complement her features and promising to match his suit, and even his flowers, to her dress. That's when Asha's confidence falters. She hesitantly asks if wearing a dress is mandatory. Linzio is shocked she's never attended such an event and explains that a formal dress is absolutely required, custom made by a seamstress. With less than a month left, most dressmakers are likely fully booked. Her only real hope, he suggests, is Lumine. Panicked, Asha dashes through the halls after the bell rings, desperately searching for Chloe. In her rush, she nearly collides with Amadeu, who tries to speak to her about the party. But she's too frantic to listen and brushes him off, promising they'll talk later. Finally finding Chloe, Asha dramatically cries that she has no clothes. After some confusion, Chloe realizes she means a party dress and calmly reveals she has the perfect solution. She leads Asha to an enormous wardrobe filled with elegant gowns, admitting she rarely wears most of them more than once. Offering a dress she wore last year, Chloe insists Asha try it on immediately. After some flustered resistance, Asha changes and steps out unsure of herself. Chloe, however, is stunned by how beautiful she looks and confidently declares that everyone at the party will want to dance with her. At the spring celebration, rumors swirl that Amadeu is attending with Lumine, and guests admire them as a striking pair. Dressed sharply in black, Amadeu escorts her with effortless composure. From afar, Asha can't help but think they look perfect together. Soon, Linzio finds her equally dressed to impress. They exchange warm compliments, and he's clearly mesmerized by her appearance. Calling her his beautiful grandeur, he offers his hand, and they spend the evening laughing, toasting, and dancing. Later, exhausted, Asha slips out onto the balcony for fresh air. Linzio joins her briefly, mentioning that Count Kaiser's friend has arrived and that he'd like to introduce her. The name alone makes Asha flinch. Not wanting any connection to the Count, she quickly insists he go ahead without her. Alone again, she reminds herself to stay cautious. The quiet is interrupted by the creak of a door. Amadeu steps onto the balcony, explaining that his own partner is busy greeting acquaintances and that he's hiding out to avoid awkward social formalities. The two stand side by side under the night sky, sharing a rare, peaceful silence as Asha softly remarks how nice the air feels. Amadeu stands close to Asha, the breeze gently tugging at her dress. In a rare soft tone, he tells her the dress suits her and calls her beautiful. For a moment, the noise of the celebration fades as they share a lingering silence, simply watching the lights below flicker against the dark. The spring celebration stretches on for several more days before finally coming to an end. Soon, the academy returns to its usual rhythm. One bright morning, Asha visits Professor Eurus in his cluttered office, where trunks and scattered papers hint at unfinished research. He offers her black tea and notices she seems distracted. She admits she's still thinking about the festival. Smiling, Eurus explains he only called her in to ask a small favor. Would she deliver a gift to her professor back home during spring vacation? She agrees, then comments that his sabbatical ended earlier than expected. Laughing, he confesses he isn't suited for rest. Even on vacation, he could only think about his research. Gathering her courage, Asha asks about a book she found in the library titled The Physiological Effect of Magical Power on the Human Body. A report by Ascadian, Eurus casually reveals he placed it there himself. However, he admits it's merely a rough first draft, compiled from only a fraction of the documents he managed to remove from the palace. When she asks why only a fraction, he dodges with nervous laughter, mentioning an unfortunate accident, and unclear limits on what he was allowed to take. Asha presses further, questioning the purpose of such experiments. Eurus claims they were conducted with full consent and mutual financial benefit, though Asha silently doubts that was true in her grandfather's case. When she asks whether the artifacts of Egeron, rumored to grant eternal life, were connected, Eurus confirms that he and the Dean mapped out the mechanism of immortality using data and magical resources from the Great Labyrinth. She wonders if Kiltz relied on such an artifact, but Eurus firmly states Kiltz is unique. Then, with a chilling smile, he reveals the research's true objective to create immortal soldiers. Later in the library, Linzio groans about having exams immediately after the festival, while Maharan scolds him like an exasperated parent. Their banter is interrupted when Maharan demands the return of a book Linzio casually admits he gave to Miss Ruth as a bribe, earning a stern shush from the librarian. Amadeu joins them, and an awkward silence follows until he discreetly slides a note to Asha asking about white snow. Ease. She writes back that Ease hasn't been eating and wonders if raw meat is needed. Amadeu responds that raising such a creature without knowing its diet is dangerous and suggests it likely consumes fossils, knowledge he gained from dissecting one himself. The revelation leaves Asha conflicted. Though disturbed, she acknowledges that dissection leads to understanding. Amadeu quietly thanks her for not reacting harshly this time. That evening, Asha tests his theory by feeding Ease a fossil from the lab. The creature happily munches it, confirming Amadeu was right. The fossils contain magic. Though guilty about taking it, she feels relieved to see Ease thriving. Back in her room, she discovers a shimmering letter from her teacher, eagerly awaiting her return for spring vacation. The heartfelt message praises her compassion, calling it not a weakness but a strength that will give her wings to soar. Yet the final sentence is cut off, leaving her unsettled. The letter also answers her question about U Peaks, recounting the legend of the great dragon whose body became the continent and the golden bird Ingram. Some say Upeek stayed behind instead of following the bird. Others believe they protect humanity. Even today, they are occasionally seen in the skies. When exam results are posted, a crowd gathers. Amadeu ranks first, while Asha places 13th, staring at the board. She feels quietly satisfied. She performed better than she expected. When the exam rankings are posted, Asha quickly spots Amadeu's name at the very top, first place again. Determined to congratulate him, she scans the crowded hallway, rising on her toes to find him. Before she can move far, Linzio suddenly appears, leaning in with a bright grin and asking if she's looking for someone. Maybe him. He grabs her shoulder lightly and asks her to come closer since the hallway is too noisy. Her heart skips as she leans in, only to ask if he's seen Amadeu. Linzio's eager expression instantly deflates. He explains that Amadeu is always busy this time of year, handling preparations for the upcoming entrance ceremony as the dean's grandson. As they walk, Linzio casually remarks that she's been talking about Amadeu a lot lately. Asha turns, surprised, wondering if that's true. For a fleeting second, she thinks Linzio looks unusually downcast, but she brushes the thought aside. He admits he may have badmouthed Amadeu before, yet insists that's not what he meant. Asha firmly denies talking about him that much, but the comment lingers between them. Later, back in her room, Asha finishes packing for spring break. Ease chirps happily as she snaps her trunk shut, only to jump in panic when loud knocking echoes through the door. Miss Ruth calls her name. In a frantic scramble, Asha hides Ease before opening the door, trying to catch her breath. Miss Ruth informs her that Ferriman Kaiser, Linzio, wants to see her and reminds her sternly to clean the room before leaving. Once the teacher leaves, Asha collapses against the door in relief, scooping Ease into her arms and praising the little Upeek for staying quiet. Still, she realizes taking Eyes home is impossible. There's no way to keep the creature hidden for a 16-hour journey. After some thought, she decides Chloe is the only one she can trust, even imagining Chloe's horrified reaction to being handed such responsibility. Outside, she finds Linzio waiting. He says he simply wanted to say goodbye while picking up a book from Miss Ruth. When Asha asks about the mysterious book Meheran was desperate to retrieve, Linzio lets her peek. As she flips through it, her face turns scarlet. It's a scandalously romantic bestseller from the north. Laughing at her reaction, Linzio explains even Miss Ruth had confiscated it. Mortified, Asha shoves it back at him, denying she's ever read such a thing. Growing more serious, Linzio hesitantly asks if she'd like to spend their last weekend before summer break in Erinville with him. She agrees but suggests inviting Meheran. Blushing deeply, Linzio asks if it could just be the two of them. She agrees again, curious about his sudden nervousness, and noticing he looks unusually neat today. In town, Asha searches for a meaningful gift for her family. Linzio recommends wine from Clodigan, his grandfather's favorite. When she asks why he isn't buying any for the Count, Linzio quietly explains his grandfather's health has declined since a trip to Arindon, leaving doctors to forbid alcohol. Asha feels a pang of sympathy despite her dislike for Count Kaiser and sincerely hopes he recovers. At a bookstore, she looks for a gift for Kits and discovers a revised, even racier edition of the same northern bestseller. Linzio teases her mercilessly, snatching the book as she flusters, until she bursts into laughter, calling him funny. Watching her laugh, Linzio's expression softens. Gathering his courage, he asks if she'd consider visiting his home in Elfinger over the summer and meeting his family. Asha's heart tightens. Count Kaiser would be there, and she cannot risk that encounter. Though tempted, she apologizes and explains she wants to spend her first vacation at home with her family. Linzio's disappointment flickers across his face, but he smiles and tells her there's no need to apologize. Before they part, Asha hesitantly asks him not to mention her to his family. Without hesitation, Linzio agrees, snapping his book shut and saying that even a jokester like him has secrets he keeps close. Then, leaning near her ear, he whispers his real secret. He wouldn't go around telling everyone about the girl he likes. Linzio gives Asha a soft, almost shy smile and admits he had imagined confessing his feelings in a far more sophisticated, charming way. But things didn't quite go as planned. Asha's cheeks turn pink at his honesty, her heart fluttering at the unexpected sincerity. Before she can respond properly, however, Amadeu suddenly appears, calling out her name and then noticing Linzio beside her. His eyes fall on the book in Linzio's hand, and he coolly asks whether Linzio has taken an interest in elemental magic. The title, Introduction to Advanced Elemental Theory, makes it seem that way. Asha casually asks if it was a good read, and Linzio shrugs that it was all right. But Amadeu's focus shifts. With a faint edge in his voice, he asks since when the two of them have become so close. Bright and oblivious to the tension, Asha cheerfully explains that Linzio is her good friend. The single word seems to sting Amadeu more than she realizes, sensing the atmosphere grow awkward. Asha quickly grabs Linzio's hand and tells Amadeu they were in the middle of something. She drags Linzio away, leaving Amadeu standing alone. Watching them go, he quietly wonders if he isn't considered her friend too. As they head toward the station, Linzio repeats the word, friend, under his breath, his earlier confidence dimming slightly. Still, he offers to walk her the rest of the way. At the bustling train station, he waves her off with a warm smile, telling her to enjoy her time with her family. From the train window, Asha waves back, promising the same. As the train pulls away with a rhythmic chuff, she smiles to herself. Soon, she'll see Kiltz again. After hours of travel through rolling countryside, the train finally arrives at Brillen Station. The moment Asha steps onto the platform, she hears a familiar voice calling her name. It's Fram. Overjoyed, she runs straight into his arms, hugging him tightly. She's shocked to learn he's been coming to the station every single day since break began, just in case she arrived. When she asks if he's tired, Fram simply shakes his head and says it's nothing. He's her older brother, after all. He welcomes her home, and together they head back. At home, a grand feast awaits. Asha nearly melts with happiness as she tastes Fram's cooking again, declaring it the best she's had in ages. Their father, Haskin, gruffly asks if she starved at school. She laughs, assuring him the academy food was fine, especially the seafood, but nothing compares to Fram's dishes. When the conversation turns to school life, Asha casually mentions she was bullied a little. Haskin immediately stiffens, his expression darkening as he demands details. Asha quickly brushes it off with a laugh, insisting it's a secret and that kids should solve their own problems. Trying to lighten the mood, she adds that someone even confessed to her. Both men freeze. Fram looks especially stunned. Asha beams teasingly, saying she's proud her little brother knows what a confession means, only for him to remind her he's actually older. Haskin calmly asks what happened next. Asha shrugs and says nothing much. She'll probably reject the boy since she only sees him as a friend. She admits she isn't interested in dating, and finds all the squealing over cool boys rather silly. They're just students, after all. Haskin points out that such feelings are normal at her age. Asha mentions her friend Chloe, who plans to marry right after graduation, calling it typical for noble girls. Haskin studies her expression carefully and nudges her under the table, telling her not to look so glum. Fram sighs heavily beside her. Though she tries to appear carefree, a subtle tension lingers, proof that things may not be as simple as she claims. Night settles quietly over the house as Asha slips into Kiltz's study, the door creaking softly behind her. She carries a neatly wrapped package and tells him she almost forgot to give it to him. When he asks what it is, she explains it's a gift from Professor Eurus. At once, Kiltz clicks his tongue in irritation, making it obvious he still dislikes the professor. As he unties the string and opens the parcel, he finds a jar of coffee beans and dryly remarks that this must be the bribe Eurus mentioned before. Asher is surprised he already knew, but Kiltz casually reveals that Eurus sends him letters constantly. He simply never bothers replying. Curious, Asha wanders over to a tall stack of unopened letters covered in dust, joking that the sight alone would make Professor Eurus cry. She opens one and reads aloud how Eurus is practically begging Kiltz to visit Efrings just once. Laughing, she teases that the professor must really like him, but Kiltz firmly dismisses the idea, calling it nothing more than a foolish delusion. According to him, Eurus is sorely mistaken if he thinks Kiltz would ever consider such a visit. Still amused, Asha then asks why Kiltz went through the trouble of creating magical mailboxes for them when ordinary letters would have worked just fine. The question makes him fall quiet. He asks, almost cautiously, if she didn't like the mailbox. Realizing her mistake, Asha quickly reassures him that she loved it. She says it was comforting to see his handwriting and that she was genuinely surprised the stationery even preserved the faint scent of his perfume. Kiltz looks at her with a soft, unreadable expression before suddenly asking what she said. The name was. Confused, Asha gives her own name, only for him to clarify he wasn't asking about her. Before she can press further, he abruptly changes the subject and tells her to go to bed. Asha protests, insisting she's an adult now and stays up much later at the academy. She complains about the overwhelming homework load, joking that the professors act as if theirs is the only class that matters. She adds that things will only get worse when Professor Iris resumes teaching, and some students were even begging Professor Travian to stay. Kiltz listens, then quietly tells her that if the academy is too hard, she can always come home. The suggestion makes her flinch. She quickly insists that although it's difficult, it's also fun, and she wants to continue her studies. Tension thickens as Kiltz taps the table impatiently. When she asks if he's mad, he avoids the question and reminds her again to sleep. She argues back, declaring she's grown now, but he firmly counters that he is still her guardian. Frustrated, Asha demands to know why he keeps changing the subject and how much longer he plans to hide things from her. Kiltz replies that he tells her only what she's allowed to know. Hurt, she calls him a liar, accusing him of never sharing anything important and always keeping his thoughts hidden. Immediately regretting her outburst, Asha tries to backtrack. But Kiltz challenges her. Does she truly expect him to reveal every thought he has? Then, for once, he opens up. He confesses he was dying to know how she was every single day at the academy, who she spent time with, whether she got hurt, every little detail. Yet he held back because he feared she would find him intrusive. Asha is stunned. She had believed he was the one hiding everything. She softly tells him he could have simply asked. The clock ticks in heavy silence. Eventually, Kiltz repeats that it's late and she should go to bed. She bids him good night, but he doesn't respond. Days pass, and the atmosphere between them grows colder. Asha had imagined spending her vacation close to him, yet he keeps avoiding her. Determined to fix things, she decides to act. One morning, she sneaks into the kitchen where Kiltz is preparing coffee and wraps her arms around him from behind, playfully asking him to make her a cup too. He goes completely still. Realizing she may have startled him, Asha quickly apologizes, explaining she only meant it as a harmless prank like before. But Kiltz turns away, his expression distant and restrained. In a low, controlled voice, he tells her it would be better if she refrained from such direct contact with him from now on. Asha trails after Kiltz from the kitchen, wondering if she had acted too childish. The air between them feels painfully stiff, every step heavy with unspoken words. Seeing his downcast expression, Kiltz finally breaks the silence and quietly suggests they go for a walk. They wander into a sunlit forest, the warmth of the afternoon filtering through the trees. Trying to ease the tension, Asha begins talking about her future. With only 1 year left until graduation, she's been thinking seriously about what comes next. She wants to work as a mage and earn her own money, to stand on her own feet. But she has no idea where to begin. As she keeps talking, she starts to feel like she's rambling. Glancing at him, she worries he isn't listening at all. Unable to bear the uncertainty, she stops and asks what he's thinking. After a pause, Kiltz admits he was trying to figure out what to say so she wouldn't end up disliking him. The answer leaves her baffled. What could he possibly say that would make her hate him? As they continue walking beside a sparkling stream, Kiltz finally opens up. He confesses that while she was away at the academy, he spent a long time reflecting on everything, especially the last words he said to her before she left. He regrets them deeply. Even now, he admits, a selfish part of him wants to keep her home forever. If it were up to him, he would drag her back and never let her leave, just to ensure she never gets hurt. He explains that although his desire to protect her came from good intentions, he was also being stubborn. Asha always found beauty and meaning in things he disliked, and she proved to be far stronger than he ever gave her credit for. The truth is, he didn't want to admit he was wrong. Now, he acknowledges that she is an adult. She will want to see the world, experience new things, and grow. So he promises not to interfere in her life anymore. It's time, he says, for them to return to where they each belong. His words hit her like a physical blow. It feels as if he's building a wall between them. Hurt, she brings up an old book she found in the academy library, one published in year 3 of the imperial calendar. Kiltz flinches. When she gently states that he must have lived for a very long time, he solemnly confirms it. He admits he can't stop her from despising him now and calls himself a coward for hiding his past, especially from the one person he didn't want to lose. But Asha doesn't judge him. What hurts her isn't his past. It's the idea that they belong in separate places. When he asks if she doesn't find him strange, she replies that the world is full of strange, illogical things. He's no exception. Kiltz confesses he wanted to protect her from harsh truths, including the truth about himself. Asha insists it was still worth learning. When he worries he would only hold her back, she snaps, grabbing his hand and demanding to know why he gets to decide that for her. They stand there, hands clasped, the forest quiet around them. She asks if he plans to leave once she graduates. Admitting she hasn't even decided her own future yet, she makes a heartfelt request when she returns next year. She wants them to travel together. There are so many places she wants to see, and she wants him by her side while she figures out her path. After a long moment, Kiltz gives in. He had once promised to give her anything she desired. How could he refuse? Soon the vacation ends. At the train station, Asha waves brightly, promising to see him next summer. As she prepares to board, Kiltz calls out her name one last time, watching her go with emotions he can no longer hide. At the station, just before her departure, Kiltz steps close and quietly asks for Asha's hand. Confused but trusting, she places it in his. He leans in and traces something slowly across her open palm, his fingertip warm against her skin. He says only that he'll see her next year. Then the announcement for the train to Astaya rings out, and the moment is over. Kiltz remains on the platform as the carriage begins to move. Inside, Asha slides down against the door, clutching her hands to her chest, heart racing. The message he traced wasn't a spell or secret formula. It was written plainly, in the common tongue. She can still feel the strokes against her skin as the words echo in her mind, "My dear, beloved Ingram." The intimacy of it leaves her shaken. Back at the academy sometime later, Chloe bluntly announces what Asha has been trying to avoid. She clearly likes her teacher. Asha explodes in flustered denial, but Chloe calmly holds up the letter Asha drafted. Addressed tenderly to Kiltz, "My dear teacher." She reminds her that Asha wrote it right after he called her his. "Dear Ingram." By any standard, Chloe declares it's a love letter. Mortified, Asha insists it's not like that. Chloe counters with a simple question. Could she show that letter to just anyone? Asha argues she showed it to Chloe, but Chloe points out she doesn't count as just anyone. That lands. Asha slumps, anxiety creeping in. Does she really have romantic feelings for Kiltz? The thought sends her groaning face first onto the bed. She wonders if she should just not send the letter at all. Chloe finds that ironic, considering how much time and emotion she poured into it. When Asha protests that she can't send something that sounds like a confession, Chloe shrugs. Her opinion doesn't matter. What matters is whether Asha can live with staying silent. Asha's flustered reaction only makes Chloe more certain. With a defeated groan, Asha decides she needs fresh air. Instead of going into town, she chooses to walk around campus to deliver something. She presents Miss Ruth with a jar of honey from the mountains of Kalinja. Though the older woman accepts it stiffly, the gesture is sincere. Chloe is shocked. Miss Ruth clearly dislikes Asha. Asha admits the feeling is mutual, but if she does nothing, nothing will ever change. When Chloe teasingly calls it a bribe, Asha indignantly denies it. Their conversation is interrupted by Linzio rushing toward them, breathless but smiling brightly. He greets Asha warmly, and she notices he's grown taller. But he looks exhausted. When she points it out, he jokes about using her lap as a pillow. Chloe immediately shuts him down. Laughing, Linzio explains he's been losing sleep caring for his grandfather, the Count, who insists on being sung lullabies to fall asleep. Asha is surprised he can sing. He tries flirting again, offering a demonstration if he can nap on her lap. But Chloe blocks him once more. Remembering his duties for the freshman entrance ceremony, Linzio dashes off, watching him leave. Asha remarks that he seems to be pretending his confession never happened. She's glad they can remain friends, but casually mentions to Chloe that Linzio confessed to her. Chloe stares in disbelief. Apparently, everyone at the academy already knew about his feelings except Asha. Embarrassed, she hurriedly suggests they go watch the ceremony. At the hall, Professor Eurus leads the entrance proceedings, welcoming the new Knights of Hope. But Asha is distracted. She quietly asks Chloe what the difference is between liking someone and loving them. Why can't feelings just be equal? Chloe answers simply greed. When you love someone, you want more. You want to know everything about them, to be part of their world, to become someone special to them. Asha lowers her gaze. She does want to know more about Kiltz, but she isn't sure how he feels in return. She knows he cares, but love, she doubts it. She confesses a fear she's long held that Kiltz only took her in because she resembles a woman from his past. He avoids speaking about her. Maybe even if he likes Asha, it isn't truly her he sees, just the same face. In a quiet voice, she concludes that the one Kiltz truly loves is probably that woman. Chloe considers this, then unexpectedly says that if it's true, Asha might actually be lucky. Asha looks up, completely bewildered. Lucky? Chloe bluntly reduces Asha's budding relationship with Professor Kiltz to coincidence and convenience. Since Asha only met him because she resembles another woman, Chloe argues, any affection he shows must stem from that resemblance. If he treats her well and might even propose, Chloe insists, what more could Asha want? Horrified, Asha rejects the idea of a proposal rooted in her appearance rather than genuine feeling. Chloe, unmoved, declares that true love doesn't exist and that investing emotions in someone is a waste. When Asha quietly asks if that means Chloe loves no one, Chloe falls into a brief silence before coldly affirming it. Their conversation is cut short as the Academy's entrance ceremony concludes. Professor Eurus introduces the Dean of Ephrangs, Luael Amadiu. Asha is stunned. Far from an elderly patriarch, the dean looks youthful, almost like Dakian's older brother rather than his grandfather. Luael begins his speech by dismantling romantic notions of noble purpose, claiming such ideals are luxuries of the privileged. Most people, he says, live only to escape poverty. Survival erodes the soul. He presents himself as a reformer who spread arcane study across the empire, bringing prosperity through magic. Then his tone sharpens. He condemns the southern nation of Izmikan for fearing magic and perpetuating slavery. Framing conquest as salvation, he declares war, calling it a mission to enlighten the South. The hall erupts in patriotic cheers, but Asha is shaken, disturbed by how easily war is celebrated. As students disperse, Chloe shrugs off the announcement and heads back to the dorms. Maharan approaches Asha, grave about the implications. The royal family hasn't responded yet. If they remain unaware, Caldrigan could be at risk. In the tension of the moment, he hesitantly asks if they are truly friends. Asha answers with warm certainty, and his quiet gratitude lingers after he leaves. Class resumes with Eurus's theatrical return. Students heckle him, begging for his predecessor or retirement, but he playfully deflects, claiming he endured a long meeting with the dean about them. He then unveils a year-long magic biology project. Students will work in pairs based on last semester's rankings, highest with lowest. Groans fill the room. Asha quickly realizes what that means. As the bottom scorer, she is paired with the top student Dakian Amadiu. Despite her protests, Eurus refuses to reconsider, and Dakian calmly takes his seat beside her. It feels deliberate. The assignment is daunting. Using mana cores extracted from Upeak dragon eggs, each pair must design a spell to fuse magical creatures and create synthetic beings. Dragons, Eurus reminds them, are living conduits of magic, their teeth, scales, eyes, and hearts all imbued with arcane properties. Harnessing a mana core to engineer new life will test their limits. The class explodes in outrage. Eurus cheerfully confirms the difficulty and dodges thrown objects. Resigned, Asha asks Dakian for his dissection notes. He hands them over without hesitation. She's stunned by their precision and depth. No wonder he ranked first. As she leans in to copy them, she becomes acutely aware of how close he is. Dakian suddenly leaned in close, his face only inches from Asha's, and softly asked how White Snow was doing. His unexpected closeness startled her, but she quickly realized he only wanted to ask about Iaz. Relieved, she explained that Iaz was growing at an alarming rate, so fast that keeping him hidden in her dorm was becoming impossible. When Dakian skeptically asked how big he had gotten, she admitted he was already larger than her pillow. Though Dakian doubted a creature could grow that much in just 6 months, Asha insisted it was true. According to Kiltz, Upeaks were born with a homing instinct, so she had been making Iaz practice flying every night in hopes that he could eventually return safely to a set. Dakian grew quiet at that, asking if it meant Iaz would leave her someday. Asha nodded, trying to sound practical. Of course he would, he belonged with his own kind. After a brief silence, Dakian hesitantly asked if he could visit Iaz sometime, and Asha warmly agreed. Later, back in her room, Asha watched Iaz sleeping peacefully in a sunny spot and sighed. No matter how comfortable he looked, he couldn't stay forever. With Professor Eurus back at the academy, the danger felt more real than ever. She grumbled that Professor Travian could at least have left her a simple egg to dissect instead of a live dragon. Determined, she decided that night's flight training would be extra long. Her thoughts then drifted to the letter she still hadn't sent to Kiltz. Chloe had teasingly called it a love letter, and though Asha had denied it, rereading her words made her blush. The letter was undeniably emotional. Staring out at the cherry blossoms, she questioned her own feelings. In the letter, she had reflected on the word Ingram, the name Kiltz once called her. Something tied to curiosity, longing, and the unknown. A place one is drawn back to despite its mystery. She confessed her desire to understand him better, even the secrets he kept, promising that nothing she learned would make her hate him. He had been the one to show her how vast and beautiful the world was, and she wanted to explore it alongside him. Though she imagined him smiling wryly at her childish sincerity, she stood by her feelings and signed the letter with deep respect and affection before placing it carefully in a decorative box. That night, Asha stood on a high ledge, urging Ease to fly. Instead of taking off, he simply rolled onto his back. Dalkian, watching nearby, questioned whether the creature could even fly at all. Asha insisted he had flapped his wings before and begged him to practice. For his own safety, a dragon couldn't remain at the academy. Still, Ease showed little interest in leaving, as if he simply wanted to stay by her side. The next morning, Asha woke to her alarm, feeling unusually warm and fluffy beneath the covers. Half asleep, she shifted, only to sense something move beside her. When she opened her eyes, she froze. Sitting in her bed was a young silver-haired boy rubbing his eyes sleepily. Asha's scream echoed through the dormitory. Chloe burst in, demanding to know what happened, only to stop short at the bizarre sight Asha trembling in bed while a naked boy clung to her and kissed her cheek. Flustered and misunderstanding everything, Chloe awkwardly offered to leave them alone. Asha, horrified, shouted that she had it all wrong. The boy was Ease. Chloe found that hard to believe, suggesting it made more sense that some random boy had swapped places with the lizard overnight. Desperate, Asha grabbed the boy's face and pointed out his glowing blue eyes. They were identical to Ease's. As if to prove the point, the boy suddenly pounced on Chloe, nuzzling her affectionately. Flustered, Chloe demanded Asha find him proper clothes. Asha admitted she only owned dresses, prompting Chloe to suggest they ask Luile, Dakian, for help. Shocked, Asha denied they were close, but Chloe teased her mercilessly, insisting she clearly enjoyed his company in class. Asha's protests only fueled Chloe's laughter as the chaotic morning spiraled further out of control. Asha quickly decided that since Dakian already knew about Ease, he might actually help them. She urged everyone to leave immediately, but Chloe stopped her, pointing out they couldn't just abandon Ease in the room. Asha looked at the blinking silver-haired boy and instantly agreed. They had to take him along. There was no way she could leave him alone without panicking. Their attempt to slip away failed almost at once when Miss Ruth caught them. Without missing a beat, Chloe claimed the boy was her cousin visiting the academy and that he had spilled juice on himself, explaining his strange clothing. Asha felt a wave of gratitude, but Chloe quietly warned that the situation had just become more complicated. Then Miss Ruth surprised them by calling out to Asha directly. She apologized for excluding her from evening dorm roll calls over the past year, admitting she had neglected her because she was a special admission student she didn't expect to last, and one she didn't particularly like. Miss Ruth confessed she had been wrong. Asha's recent gesture of goodwill with the honey had moved her, and she promised to include Asha in roll call inspections from now on. The apology felt like a nightmare. Regular inspections meant her room would be checked, making it impossible to hide Ease. Chloe bluntly pointed out that clothes were now the least of their problems. In desperation, Asha suggested sending Eyes back to Kalinja, but Chloe reminded her the trip would take 10 days and require a proper excuse. Worse, Ease couldn't even speak. Asha refused to send him away alone. Before they could think further, Linzio and Maharan appeared, confused to see them near the boys' dormitory. Asha explained they were borrowing clothes from Amadeu, and after hearing everything, Linzio was stunned. The boy was the dragon Asha had been secretly raising, and he had turned human overnight. They began brainstorming. Linzio's first reaction, however, was jealous disbelief that Ease had slept in Asha's bed. Maharan suggested informing a professor, but Asha immediately rejected the idea, insisting Professor Eurus was the greatest threat to Ease. Her own idea, passing him off as a transfer student, was quickly dismissed. Chloe's side involving more people hadn't improved anything. Tension rose when Maharan turned on Chloe, questioning why she was helping and accusing her of being a snitch. He revealed she had reported Inral, leading to the girl's expulsion. Chloe didn't deny it, calmly. She admitted she had reported Inral and asked if he had a problem with that. When Linzio mentioned her family's anti-war stance, Chloe stunned them by declaring she personally supported the war. Asha argued that war only brought meaningless bloodshed. Chloe sharply challenged that idea. Was it meaningless to the slaves from the Crescent Peninsula? She pointed out that merchant families like the Kaisers worried about blocked trade routes but ignored the laborers who laid arcane train tracks and the hidden slaves serving in their homes. Was dying in battle truly worse than slowly wasting away in chains? Her words cut deep, leaving the group shaken. Drained, Chloe excused herself to lie down, and Maharan followed. Left alone with Asha and Ease, Linzio proposed a temporary solution. They would claim Ease was his cousin who had traveled alone to visit him. Though it contradicted Chloe's earlier excuse, Linzio promised to handle it if questioned. Grateful, Asha left Ease in his care. Later, Linzio proudly presented a permission slip. Though visitors were normally forbidden, he had secured approval for Eyes to stay in his room for a few days. Asha felt immense relief and thanked him repeatedly. When he jokingly asked for drinks as thanks, she eagerly agreed and they headed out immediately. At the bar, however, Linzio drank heavily. Asha watched him with concern as he brought up the war again. Though he opposed it, he admitted he didn't believe the dean's motives were as noble as Chloe assumed. In his view, the dean wasn't the kind of man who would risk himself for something as intangible as freeing slaves, suggesting the truth behind the war was far more complicated than it seemed. Asha asked Linzio if he knew the dean well, and he explained that their families had been close since childhood. He admitted he had always thought the man was Dakian's father and had been shocked to learn he was actually his grandfather. Then, turning serious, he asked what she thought about people who never aged. The question startled Asha, as she immediately thought of kilts, but she struggled to answer. Linzio stated that he found such people selfish. When she reacted in surprise, he clarified that while death was painful, it was inevitable. He argued that immortality meant watching everyone you loved die, and he questioned what would remain for someone left alone forever. Fidgeting with her drink, Asha suggested that perhaps those people had a reason to keep living despite the pain. Realizing she sounded defensive, she quickly claimed she was referring to the dean. Linzio repeated the phrase, "reason to live," thoughtfully before drinking more, and she told him to slow down. Flushed from alcohol, he then asked if she was rejecting his confession from the other day. With regret, Asha confirmed that she was and apologized. Linzio accepted it calmly, saying the rejection helped him strengthen his resolve. When she looked confused, he admitted he liked her because she didn't know the darker burdens he carried. Being with her allowed him to stop thinking about complicated matters. He started to mention issues involving his grandfather but stopped, saying some things were better left unsaid. Instead, he asked for permission to keep trying, clarifying that he wasn't asking her to return his feelings yet, but hoped she might see him differently someday. Moments later, he collapsed onto the table drunk. Watching him, Asha quietly apologized again. Back at the academy, Asha decided she couldn't avoid Dalkian and would face him for their project. She asked if he had chosen a concept for their synthetic being. When he admitted he hadn't, she presented her idea of creating a mountain giant. She explained that, based on his notes and her research, its mana core resembled a Upeak's. Dakian acknowledged it as a unique idea, noting that most Central students ignored northern creatures, and agreed it could earn them high marks. Asha suggested he analyze the mana core components while she outlined the spell, taking the lead as he watched her work with a faint smile. Professor Yuras approached and expressed high expectations for their pairing. He then questioned Asha about her previous semester, revealing he had read her dissection report and found it terrible. Nervous he might uncover the truth about Ease, she hesitated. Dakian quickly intervened, claiming she couldn't complete the task because the eggs insides were too grisly. Yuras accepted this explanation with patronizing sympathy before being called away. Before leaving, he relayed a message that Viscount Lumine was visiting and the dean wanted Dakian to welcome him. Surprised, Asha assumed it meant Chloe's father was coming, but Dakian revealed that Chloe was not truly the Viscount's daughter. He explained that her mother had been a slave and that the Lumine family had never officially registered her, effectively still treating her as one. He added that she would be disowned if she failed to secure a noble marriage, as the Viscount sought status through her. Though Dakian advised her not to pry, Asha refused to ignore it because Chloe was her friend. She hurried to find Chloe and was introduced to Viscount Linter Madison Lumine, standing frozen as she noticed they looked nothing alike. Chloe introduced Asha to her father, explaining that Asha often helped her at the academy. However, the Viscount immediately reprimanded Chloe for her manners, insisting she should have begun with Asha's noble house. Chloe quickly apologized, but the Viscount then turned to Asha and demanded her surname and lineage. When Asha calmly stated that she was not a noble and introduced herself simply as Asha Konak, he reacted with open contempt. He mocked her lack of refinement and accused Chloe of wasting her time associating with commoners instead of focusing on her purpose at the academy. Grabbing Chloe's arm roughly, he called her foolish and implied that the money spent on her education was meant for securing advantageous connections, not studying. Mahiran suddenly intervened, ordering the Viscount to stop. He reminded him that academy rules applied to everyone. The Viscount arrogantly questioned Mahiran's authority to interfere in a father disciplining his daughter. In response, Mahiran coldly asked whether such barbaric treatment of a young woman could truly be called proper etiquette. The Viscount scoffed, insulting the dean for admitting commoners and northerners, and went so far as to insinuate that Asha had been brought in as a mere plaything. Enraged, Mahiran raised his wand to the man's throat and demanded he repeat himself. When the Viscount nervously pointed out that using magic on school grounds was forbidden, Mahiran replied that his wand could just as easily serve as a sword and hinted at the North's brutal dueling customs. Terrified, the Viscount released Chloe and stormed off, threatening to report them all to the dean. Afterward, Mahiran dismissed the man as pathetic and checked if Chloe was hurt. He apologized to Asha for the insult she had endured and then warned her not to associate with families like Chloe's, remarking, "Like father, like daughter." Chloe stopped him sharply and asked whether her status as an illegitimate child disgusted him that much. Through tears, she described herself as nothing more than a bastard sold into a vulgar family. Mahiran, flustered, clarified that he had only meant her involvement in Inral's expulsion. Chloe admitted she had reported Inral and challenged him. asking whether he had ever considered the suffering of people from the Crescent Peninsula while comfortably philosophizing. Confronted by her words, Maharan unexpectedly knelt and offered a sincere apology, admitting he had been ignorant of her circumstances. Still crying, Chloe asked whether knowing the truth would have changed anything or whether he simply despised her dirty bloodline. In a rush, Maharan confessed that he had feelings for her and had felt betrayed by her actions. Asha stood stunned, having assumed he liked Inral. Maharan clarified that Inral was only a friend and dismissed rumors about other girls, confirming his feelings were genuine. Feeling like an intruder in the emotional exchange, Asha quietly excused herself. Later, at the station, Linzio handed Asha and Ease warming stones for their journey north, teasing lightly despite the earlier tension. Maharan also tried to give one to Chloe, warning her about the harsh winters. Though she initially refused, she blushed as she boarded the train. Asher and Linzio shared a small laugh at the sight. Before departing, Asha thanked Maharan once more for his family's offer to care for Ease, and he replied modestly that he had only done what he could, asking her to look after Ease well.